Hello, my dear friend of sleepy history. Welcome back to this quiet space, where the past becomes a gentle bedtime story, and the Earth's oldest secrets are whispered gently into the night. Tonight, we drift into the Permian period, a world so different from ours. Journey to a world of ancient reptiles, some with sails on their backs, some laying eggs on dry land for the very first time. They were the ancestors of dinosaurs, paving the way for giants yet to come. But in this story also lies sorrow, the Earth's greatest extinction, when nearly all life faded. And yet, life whispered on. Before we begin, what time is it where you are? Leave us a little comment, so across oceans and pillows, we may fall asleep together under the same ancient sky. Now, shall we begin? Part 1, Reptiles Thrive. 1. The first reptiles and their quiet bloom. The earliest reptilian pioneers. Close your eyes, dear dreamer, and drift with me, far beyond the noise of today's world, to a time long before humankind ever drew breath. The earth was quiet then, not silent, but hushed, like a breath held between chapters. It was the dawn of the Permian period, nearly 300 million years ago, and something ancient was stirring beneath the canopy of fading Carboniferous forests. From the leaf-littered floor and shaded rocks, the very first reptiles began to rise. Fragile at first, small and cautious, but carrying within them a seed of incredible change. Creatures like Hylonomus, no larger than your hand, with slender legs and delicate, scaly skin, tiptoed through ferns and shadows. They were not like the amphibians they descended from. No longer bound to water for reproduction, they had begun to claim the land as their own. Their eyes held stillness, but their bones whispered of independence. These were the true pioneers of the dry earth, the first vertebrates who could fully live away from swamps and streams. They breathed air without dampness. They walked with bodies lifted high off the forest floor, already preparing unknowingly for the deserts to come. Isn't it beautiful to think that every lizard sunbathing today, every bird perched on a branch, every mammal curled in a den, owes a sliver of its being to these quiet little wanderers? Let's stay a little longer with them, in this moment of stillness before the world changed. There's more to their story. Would you like to follow? A body built for the dry earth. The forest was changing. The air no longer smelled only of damp moss and rain-soaked bark. It began to carry a faint dryness, a whisper of dust. And so, the early reptiles, those gentle trailblazers of time, began to change with it. Their bodies told the story first. Unlike their amphibian cousins, whose bellies still pressed low against the moist earth, these reptiles stood taller. Their limbs had shifted beneath their bodies, lifting them off the ground. A quiet revolution that brought freedom. Now they could move more swiftly, waste less energy, and avoid the chill of damp soil. Each step was a gentle rebellion against the world they had once depended on. Their skin, too, was different. No longer soft and water-bound, it had thickened, grown scaly, not cold but clever. These scales, made of keratin, formed a natural armor, shielding them from dryness, wind, and sun. Their bodies no longer wept water like the old ones did. Instead, they held it in, carefully rationing life drop by drop, as if each drop were sacred. And inside, their lungs had grown stronger, capable of drawing breath from drier air. Their hearts beat with new rhythm, separating oxygen more efficiently. A quiet improvement that echoed forward in time, one heartbeat at a time. If you listen closely, perhaps you can feel it too. The dignity of survival. the quiet strength of a body that chose to stay, even when the world began to change. Come closer now. The story deepens still. For from these sturdy forms would come not just wanderers but rulers. Shall we meet the first families of that ancient royal bloodline? The branching paths of reptilian destiny. As time tiptoed forward, evolution did not shout. It whispered. The early reptiles, once a quiet handful of wanderers, began to change in different directions. Slowly, almost dreamlike, they branched into new families, each one shaped by the land they walked and the choices they didn't know they were making. Some, like the Captorinids, became stocky and low to the ground, with powerful jaws made for crunching tough plants. Steady, patient souls of the Permian. Others grew leaner, more agile, like the Proto-Rotheridids, slipping through shadows in search of insects. And then, there were those whose skulls hinted at something new. A single temporal opening behind the eye. The synapsids, silent ancestors of mammals, of us. Can you feel it? That quiet miracle, that from these little lizards, you too were once a whisper on the wind. Each group was a possibility, each form a question. What does it mean to survive? To thrive? Some adapted by strength, others by subtlety, and some simply by staying still and letting time shape them. And isn't that what life asks of us, too? Sometimes we push forward with all our might. Other times we adapt softly, silently, and that too is a kind of strength. So rest here, in the gentle branching of time. You don't need all the answers tonight. You are part of this long story just like they were. And next, we meet a quiet revolution, a gift hidden in an egg, a shelter, a promise, a future wrapped in membranes. Would you like to go there with me? The gift of the amniotic egg-eye shell around hope. Some gifts are soft and small, yet they change everything. Hidden beneath leaf litter, tucked into warm earth or nestled between roots, the first amniotic eggs lay silent, but powerful. Unlike the jelly-like eggs of amphibians, these were sealed in a protective shell, with membranes to cushion, nourish, and breathe. A complete little world inside each fragile oval. This was freedom. For the first time in Earth's long story, a vertebrate could bring forth life entirely on land. No longer did they need ponds or swamps for their young to grow. Now they could climb hills, cross dry ground, seek shelter in caves, and still raise children of stone and sun. That's what the egg was. A portable ocean, a memory of the water they once needed, carried gently inside. And perhaps there's something in that for us too, that even as we leave old comforts behind, we carry with us what matters. You too hold oceans within memories, roots, resilience. Rest with that thought. You're not as fragile as you think. Two roads, synapsids and sauropsids. And so, evolution reached a fork in the forest path. Some reptiles took one direction. They became synapsids, the ancestors of mammals, of wolves and whales, and even you and me. Others became sauropsids, ancestors of lizards, turtles, crocodiles, and dinosaurs to come. This was more than a split in name. It was the beginning of two great lineages, shaped by time, climate, and mystery. One would give rise to warm blood and fur, the other to scales and soaring wings. Neither was better. Both were beautiful. In life, too, we often come to forks, choices we don't fully understand, roads we walk unsure. But like these ancient creatures, sometimes just choosing to continue is the victory. And whichever path you take, it still belongs to the great story. Reptiles claim the land. By the end of the early Permian, these creatures were no longer timid guests on land. They were becoming its rulers. They filled many roles. Some grazed on ferns and seed plants, while others hunted in silence. Some were slow and armored, others swift and sharp-eyed. In dry valleys, forest edges, and rocky slopes, they made their homes, and with every hatchling that emerged, the earth grew more reptilian. They weren't flashy. They weren't giants, not yet, but they were present, patient, persistent, and perhaps that's something we need reminding of. You don't have to be loud to leave a mark. You don't have to be perfect to belong. Even the smallest, quietest life matters, especially when it endures. So now take a deep breath. You've wandered far tonight, but the journey has only just begun. Shall we step into the next chapter together, where the egg becomes a promise fulfilled and the desert begins to whisper? 2. The secret inside the egg. A sea within the first amniotic eggs. Lean in just a little closer now. Can you feel it? A quiet hush, as if the earth herself is holding her breath. It is in this moment that life does something remarkable, not with a roar, but with a shell. Somewhere in the Permian forests, a new kind of egg rests beneath a patch of dry leaves. It looks ordinary, still, silent, but inside it lies a hidden ocean. A tiny, self-contained world where a life can grow, untouched by rain or pond or stream. This is the first amniotic egg, and it changes everything. Before this moment, vertebrates had always returned to the water to create life. But now, with this marvel of biology, this soft, sealed sanctuary, they are no longer tethered to the swamps of their past. For protective membranes, a yolk for nourishment, and a gentle bath of fluid inside, it is a universe of safety carried gently across the land. Do you see how powerful that is? To bring the sea with you, inside you, even as the land grows dry. Maybe you've done the same in your own way. Carried softness inside when the world felt hard. Protected a dream in silence until it was strong enough to hatch. So rest now. You're not alone in this journey. Even ancient reptiles needed a shell before they found their stride. Shall we keep walking beside them? Letting go of the water. Once, all life crawled back to the water to be born. Like a ritual too old to question, too sacred to break, amphibians would return to the same moist places, their eggs soft, vulnerable, waiting in the quiet shallows. But now, something has changed. With the arrival of the amniotic egg, reptiles no longer need to kneel before the pond. They can wander. They can climb rocky hillsides, sleep beneath trees, roam sun-baked plains, and still carry the future with them. The egg allows life to happen far from water. It is a symbol of detachment, not from roots, but from limits. And isn't that freeing? The early reptiles, with their leathery eggs tucked into sandy nests, had become independent in a way no vertebrate had ever been. They no longer needed the wetlands that defined their ancestors. Now they belonged to the land, and the land at last belonged to them. Can you feel the echo in your own life? There comes a time when you no longer need the places you once depended on. When you realize you've grown legs strong enough to carry yourself forward. When you whisper goodbye to the swamp and step into your own dry sunlight. Not because the past was bad, but because the future is calling. Come, let's follow them a little further. They are not just surviving now, they are becoming. A home that travels, life moves with the egg. The amniotic egg was more than a vessel, it was a home. Not fixed to a pond, not washed away by a storm, but placed gently on dry land, under sun-warmed soil, among quiet stones. It meant life could now go anywhere. The early reptiles became explorers, not just of landscapes, but of possibility. From shaded woodlands to arid plains, they carried their fragile, precious worlds with them, tucked beneath their bellies or hidden among roots. Each egg was a promise whispered into the dust. I will grow here. I will rise from this place. And perhaps you've carried a promise like that, too. A dream, a child, a part of yourself, into a space where no one believed it could thrive. But it did, because when you protect something with love and shield it with quiet strength, it grows. It always does. So now the earth saw something new, animals that no longer wandered back for safety. Instead, they built safety inside themselves and then moved forward. It was bold. It was gentle. It was evolution, and it was hope. Two great branches. A family tree takes root. With the gift of the egg came another quiet miracle. Diversity. Reptiles began to split into two great groups. Not loudly, not all at once, but like a branching river under moonlight. One path led to the synapsids, the warm-blooded future-bearers, the ancestors of mammals. They would one day grow fur, nurse their young, and dream beneath stars. The other led to the sauropsids, the lineage of scaled creatures and feathered flyers, of lizards, turtles, crocodiles, and birds. And one day, of dinosaurs. This split was subtle, just a small difference in the skull, a tiny window behind the eye. But from that window, two worlds would unfold. Isn't it humbling that something so vast can begin so quietly? That your path, too, might already be changing, even if the world hasn't noticed yet? There is beauty in the invisible, power in the small beginnings. Let's stay here a moment longer and listen to the stillness of the egg, where new futures are forming. A silent revolution, unlike the thunder of asteroid impacts or the roar of volcanoes. This revolution made no sound, no cataclysm, no extinction, just eggs, quietly laid beneath trees. But it was one of the greatest turning points in Earth's story, because now vertebrates could dominate the land, not just live on it, thrive on it. They could spread, adapt, specialize. They could become tiny or titanic, armored or feathered, all because of one gentle invention, the amniotic egg. No headlines, no witnesses, just survival, slowly blooming into greatness. Maybe your growth feels like that sometimes. Quiet, invisible, like no one sees the strength it takes to just keep going. But it matters, just like theirs did. The lesson of the egg. So what does this little shell tell us? Across 300 million years, it says, you are enough, even if you are small, even if you're still growing, even if no one sees what you're holding inside. It says, you can be soft and strong at the same time, because protection isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And creating life in any form is the bravest thing any creature can do. Tonight, as you lie beneath your own roof, your own shell, know that you are part of this great story. A story of resilience, a story of quiet courage, a story that began in an egg. Now let's gently close this chapter, but stay close, because next, we follow these brave beings into their new world. A land growing drier, harder, but also richer with possibility. Would you like to walk that path together? 3. Reptile ecosystem. A new stage beneath a drying sky. The world had shifted. Where once there were endless wetlands and towering ferns, now there were vast dry woodlands, sun-bleached plains, and thirsty winds. The earth was aging, growing quieter, but not empty. Something new stirred beneath the cracked soil. A different kind of balance was beginning. And at its center stood the reptiles. No longer guests of the land, They were becoming its stewards. They moved with quiet confidence, their scales glinting beneath fading canopies. Their eggs nestled safely in warm dust. Their limbs carried them far from the ancient swamps of their ancestors. Now they were building something bigger. The first true terrestrial ecosystems ruled not by water, but by rhythm, sun and shadow, hunger and rest. Every creature had a part to play. Tiny insect eaters skittered through the underbrush. Leaf eaters grazed slowly under low trees. Hunters lurked in silence, watching for movement. And the land, dry though it was, responded. Plants hardened their leaves. Trees spaced themselves carefully. Even the soil began to breathe differently. This was no longer the world of amphibians. This was the age of reptiles, measured not in size or speed, but in presence, in quiet dominance. And isn't there a kind of peace in that? You don't need to be loud to be essential. Sometimes just showing up and staying is how you change the world. Shall we step closer now and listen to how these gentle pioneers interacted, hunted, shared, and survived? Silent threads in the web of life. If you listen closely, you might hear it. Not a roar, not a crash, but the hush of movement, the shifting of scales through dry grass, the crunch of leaves beneath a cautious step. This was the music of the Permian food web, delicate, precise, and alive. In this newborn ecosystem, every creature had a role. The plant eaters, gentle giants like Edaphosaurus, with sails like sun rays on their backs, grazed on fibrous plants, helping shape the landscape. Tiny insectivores scurried between roots, quick and curious, always watching the sky. And then there were the hunters, still small for now but cunning. Dimetrodon, with its saber-toothed grin and forward-facing eyes, waited with patience, striking not in rage, but in perfect timing. This was not yet an age of war. It was an age of balance. The predators did not destroy, they pruned. The grazers did not devour, they shaped. Even decay had its part, feeding the soil, whispering nutrients back into the roots. Does it sound familiar? You see, in every life, even yours, there are roles we step into. Sometimes we lead, sometimes we nourish, and sometimes we simply hold space so others may grow. There is no shame in any of it. Nature teaches us everything belongs when it moves in harmony. Shall we go deeper? Let's meet those gentle plant eaters and hear how they fed not just themselves, but the entire land. Gentle gardeners of the dry earth. They did not hunt. They did not run. They moved slowly, heavy bodies swaying with calm purpose, heads lowered, eyes soft. These were the plant eaters of the early Permian. Creatures like Edaphosaurus, with sprawling limbs and wide sails upon their backs. Others like Captorinus, small and nimble, nibbling at tough leaves with toothy jaws. They were not dramatic, but they were essential. Feeding on ferns, woody stems, and sun-hardened roots, they digested what few could. Their guts were evolving. Longer intestines, stronger stomachs, internal landscapes as rich and complex as the forests around them. Through them, energy moved from sun to leaf to body to soil. Through them, the land learned to breathe in cycles. They were the quiet alchemists of the ecosystem, turning green into life. And isn't that beautiful? In a world that often celebrates speed, power, and noise, these creatures remind us of another kind of strength. The strength to sustain, to support, to stay. Maybe tonight that's the kind of strength you carry, too. Maybe you are feeding something, a family, a hope, a fragile part of yourself, not with flash, but with steady care. The world needs that, just as the Permian needed its gentle grazers. Let's rest with them a little longer. Their rhythm is soft, their wisdom ancient, but not all was peace. Beyond the shade, in the stillness of stone, hunters began to stir. The quiet hunters. They did not howl. They did not need to. Their strength was stillness, their weapon patience. Dimetrodon, the iconic sail-backed predator, rose from the shadows like a whisper in the dawn. With sharp, serrated teeth and eyes that watched everything, it was not the biggest or fastest, but it knew how to wait. It knew how to listen. These early carnivores were not monsters. They were necessary threads in the fabric of life. By culling the weak, they strengthened the herd. By feeding on life, they returned it to the soil. They taught the world a hard, quiet truth, that death can nourish too, that endings are not failures, they are transitions. Perhaps you've felt that before, the ache of letting go, of moving on. Like them, maybe you've learned to shed something not out of cruelty but because it was time. Predators are not just destroyers. They are balancers, keepers of rhythm. And even in your own story, there may be parts of you that hunt not to harm, but to protect what still grows. So do not fear the shadows. Sometimes that's where guardians sleep. Unseen struggles, natural order. Beneath the calm, the land was always listening, watching as species rose and fell, each testing its place beneath the sun. Reptiles began to compete quietly, not with violence, but with presence. Some ate faster, some grew smaller, others nested earlier, climbed higher, stayed awake longer. Each shift, each habit, each silent adaptation became a brushstroke in the great mural of survival. And just as in life, not everyone thrived. Some faded, some vanished, not out of weakness, but because the world had changed, and not every heartbeat matched its new rhythm. But even that was okay, because nature holds space for evolution, for experimentation, for letting go. You too are allowed to shift, to stumble, to try again. You are not behind. You are becoming. Let the Permian teach you this. There is no shame in trying. There is only learning. Foundations of a future kingdom. From these small players, the grazers, the hunters, the nameless in-between, rose a foundation so steady, so strong, it would one day carry the weight of dinosaurs, of birds, even of mammals. The Permian reptiles were building not just a food web, but a legacy. Each interaction, each adaptation, each loss and gain, they wove together the blueprint of Earth's future. Their ecosystems were not flashy. They were resilient. And maybe that's the lesson to carry tonight, that you don't need to be extraordinary to be meaningful. You just need to keep showing up, to find your rhythm, to belong in your own quiet, persistent way. Like them, you are part of something ancient, a lineage not of perfection, but of persistence. And every day you continue, you honor it. Now, shall we rest for a while? The sun has dipped low over the dry lands, but ahead lies another chapter, where the earth itself begins to change. Part 2, Arid Climates and Desertification. 1. Permian climatic background. When the continents came together. Once upon a long, long time ago, the earth gathered her scattered pieces into one. All the wandering continents, the drifting islands and fractured lands, slowly drifted back into a single embrace. This massive supercontinent was called Pangaea. It was vast, so vast that if you stood at its heart, you might never see the sea again. And that changed everything. With oceans now pushed to the edges, the heart of the world began to dry. No more soothing breezes from coastal waters. No more gentle rains from far-off currents. The interior of Pangaea, isolated and alone, became a furnace beneath the sky. The wind blew dust instead of mist. The rivers ran thin, then vanished. And the clouds, once generous with their tears, became strangers to the land. But even in this harsh stillness, life did not stop. It shifted. Reptiles, those quiet pioneers, had already learned how to live apart from the water. Now they would go further, learning how to thrive beneath a sun that showed no mercy, in a world where shade became sacred and water was treasure. Have you ever felt that? When life pulls everything away and you're left in your own dry silence? That doesn't mean you're alone. It means something inside you is about to grow roots deeper than ever before. Let's walk further into this world together, where drought writes the rules, and yet life still answers. The winds fell silent, and the rain forgot. The air changed. When the continents merged into Pangaea, not only did the land shift, so did the sky. Ocean currents that once circled freely were disrupted. Moisture, which used to travel kindly across coastlines and deep into valleys, now had nowhere to go. It was trapped at the edges of the world. And so the wind grew quiet. The rains became rare visitors, unpredictable, fleeting. The cycle of water, the breath of the planet, was broken. Days grew blisteringly hot. Nights turned bitterly cold. This land of extremes, so vast, so ancient, became the first true theater of climate hardship. Where once mist danced between the trees, now the sun reigned without apology. You might imagine it like standing in the center of a desert the size of a continent, with the horizon melting in heat, and not a single cloud to shield you. And yet, life persisted. Plants shrunk their leaves. Animals learned to burrow or move by night. Water was no longer taken for granted. It was sought, stored, savored. Perhaps you've had seasons like this too, where what once came easily suddenly slips away, where even breath feels dry. But nature reminds us, in stillness we adapt. In silence we listen deeper. And even when the rain forgets us for a while, our roots remember how to wait. Let's continue now into the heart of the heat. For in the dry bones of this land, something fierce and wise was being born. The long summer begins. There was a time when the seasons blurred. No longer did the rains come on schedule. No longer did the coolness of spring soothe the land. Instead, there was only the long summer, unending, unyielding. The sun no longer whispered, it blazed. Across Pangaea's vast equatorial belt, the heat took root. Days scorched the land with dry breath. The ground cracked open like parched lips. Trees stood farther apart, casting thin shadows. And beneath them, life crept slowly, carefully, trying not to burn. It was here that Earth's first great deserts were born. Not just patches of sand, but entire kingdoms of dust and stone. Wind sculpted dunes like sleeping giants. Red soils stretched endlessly. And in the silence, a new kind of beauty emerged. Fierce, quiet, timeless. Do you feel it? That ancient heat? Not just in the air, but in the soul, the kind of pressure that makes you shed what you no longer need. That asks, what will you carry forward? What will you leave behind? In this harshness, life simplified. Creatures shrunk. Plants armored themselves. Some slept through the heat. Others rose at dusk. It wasn't ease that made them strong. It was adaptation. And you too may be learning that now. How to stand in long summers of the soul. How to become a little tougher, but not colder. Let us walk forward now into the dunes of deep time, where hardship is not the end, but the beginning of evolution. The droughts that stayed. The dryness was no longer a passing guest. It had made itself at home. What once began as seasonal changes became millennia of drought. The earth's breath grew thin, and water, once playful and abundant, became a secret, hidden deep underground or vanished altogether. Forests shrank. Wetlands dried to powder. Only the strongest roots survived. This wasn't a quick disaster. It was a slow silence, creeping over generations. Some creatures disappeared, not from violence, but from forgetting how to live in stillness. And yet, there were those who stayed. They learned to store moisture inside, to move less, to need less, to rest when the world became too loud or too dry. Maybe you know that kind of wisdom too, that gentle art of slowing down, not because you've given up, but because you're listening, because the world has asked you to change. And you have. Desert-born, desert-strong. From the cracks in the ground came a new kind of wild. The first deserts of Earth, sculpted not in haste, but over lifetimes. Their dunes weren't lifeless. They whispered with secret movement. Insects vanished into burrows. Lizards danced across the heat. Reptiles, once bound to forests, now crept through red sand with eyes half closed, conserving every drop of energy. They weren't escaping the drought. They were becoming part of it. Some even thrived. They used the heat, reflected the light, hid beneath stones. They learned to bend without breaking. And isn't that the heart of evolution? To not fight the harshness, but to listen to it. To let the world shape you, not into something weaker, but something truer. So if you're walking through a desert in your life, know this: deserts do not mean endings. They mean transformation. And in the Permian, those who embraced the silence would carry Earth's legacy forward. Even as storms gathered on the farthest horizon, nature's silent selection. In the quiet heat of the Permian world, something invisible was at work. It wasn't teeth or claws. It wasn't a chase or a roar. It was time and pressure. The harsh climate did not shout, it whispered. And that whisper said, "Only the adaptable shall remain." Species that once flourished in gentler days began to fade. Their leaves too wide, their skins too thin, their needs too many, and slowly, without fanfare, they vanished. Not in explosions, but in silences. Yet from this stillness, something else stirred. Resilient life. Life that didn't resist change, but danced with it. Small reptiles with tougher skins. Seeds that slept through drought. Creatures that found shade not in trees, but in shadows of stone. This was evolution's quiet engine. Not a war, but a refinement. Not a punishment, but a sculpting. And you, dear listener, you might feel that pressure too. From work, from family, from the invisible weight of simply surviving. But pressure is not your enemy. Sometimes, it is the force that shapes you into who you are meant to become. The Permian reminds us, even in the driest seasons, there is growth. Even in the heat, something beautiful is being forged. Now, shall we walk on? The deserts are behind us, but ahead lies the dawn of new ecosystems and the first steps of life beneath burning skies and shifting sands. 2. Formation of deserts, where the ocean's voice faded. There once were coasts where waves whispered to trees, but in the Permian, even the oceans began to retreat from the land. As the supercontinent Pangaea stretched and groaned, its coastal regions began to dry, not from distance but from silence. Moist winds no longer reached the shores. Rain fell less often, And over time, the gentle balance between sea and soil unraveled. These weren't deserts yet, not fully. They were thresholds, edges of fading green where plants clung to memory and roots reached deeper, hoping for one more drop. Here, grasses turned brittle. Ferns curled inward. Streams became cracks. And the air, it hung heavy, still, full of light but without promise. Have you ever felt like that? Like you're standing at a shoreline that once sang to you, and now only echoes? These coastal plains were the first to feel the change. And they did not resist it, they listened. Some life retreated inward. Some adapted in place. Others evolved into something new. This was where the whisper of desert began. Not with a storm, but with a hush. Not with heat, but with absence. Come closer now. Let us follow the sands as they begin to move. For the next part of our story begins with wind and the shaping of Earth's first sea of dunes, where the wind became the sculptor. After the coasts grew silent, the winds awoke. They didn't bring rain. They brought dust. Grain by grain, whisper by whisper, they carried the bones of ancient mountains and scattered them across the land, painting dunes where forests once stood. These were not the deserts we know today. They were primordial sandscapes, stretching for hundreds of kilometers. Seas of gold and rust and ochre, ever shifting, never resting. The earth, once lush and layered, now wore a robe of dust, and the wind became a sculptor, crafting curves and ridges, pushing the land into waves that never touched water. In these forming deserts, life held its breath. The sun beat down, shadows grew short, and still something stirred beneath the sand. Tiny lizards left delicate trails. Insects tunneled deep to hide from the heat. Seeds buried themselves, waiting for a future storm that might never come. This wasn't death. It was reinvention. Have you ever had to rebuild, not from joy, but from necessity? To take what's left and shape it into something beautiful? That's what the wind did here. That's what life learned to do. Now come. The dunes are rising. Let us step quietly across their backs. For beneath their silence lies a secret, that even the harshest places can cradle life. In the silence, life whispers. It's easy to think of deserts as empty, but if you listen closely, they are never truly silent. Beneath the dunes of the Permian, a new kind of world was being born. Not green, but golden. Not loud, but alive. Mosses clung to shaded rocks. Fungi wove invisible threads below the surface. Tiny arthropods skittered from shadow to shadow, and reptiles with scaled bellies slipped across the sand like ghosts. Here, the rules were different. No room for excess. No space for waste. Every drop of water was sacred. Every shadow was shelter. Every heartbeat measured. This wasn't a lush jungle with towering trees. This was something deeper. An ecosystem of restraint, of elegance in simplicity. And yet balance held. Predators still hunted. Prey still fled. Seeds still waited, tucked beneath layers of sand, dreaming of rain. Life in the desert was not less than it was refined, stripped down, owned, quietly wise. Maybe you, too, have found yourself in places that seemed barren. Times when the world gave you less than you hoped for. But the desert teaches us this. Even in scarcity, we can build. Even in silence, we can connect. Even in the hardest places, life chooses to try. Let's go deeper now. The creatures of the sand have secrets to share, if we move gently and listen well. Learning to bend, not break. In the heart of the desert, adaptation was no longer optional. It was a language of survival. Reptiles, once large and sprawling, grew smaller, more efficient. Their bodies conserved moisture. Their movements slowed. Many only emerged at dusk, when the heat loosened its grip. They traded speed for stillness, hunger for patience. Plants, too, became artists of endurance. Some wore waxy skins. Some shed their leaves entirely. Their roots dove deep, searching for water like memories buried under time. There were no loud battles here, no flashy displays, only quiet triumphs. Each leaf that curled to shade itself, each lizard that learned to wait instead of chase. Have you ever had to do that, dear listener? To shrink, not out of fear, but wisdom? To rest, not because you're weak, but because you know the storm will pass? In this desert world, life whispered, "Be soft with yourself, and sharp when needed." For survival was not a fight, it was an art. Trials of dust, triumphs of change. As centuries passed, the desert became a forge. Species were tested again and again, not with disaster but with duration. Not in battles, but in the slow grind of dry time. Some failed, some vanished, but those who remained carried something rare. Resilience etched into their bones. The Permian hongmak became a school of subtle genius. Reptiles developed thicker skin, better lungs, more efficient kidneys. Even their eggs changed, tougher shells, more watertight membranes, quiet marvels of evolutionary engineering. And through it all, ecosystems held together. Tightly woven webs of simple lives, each link fragile, yet strong in its place. Isn't that like us too? Our lives, our communities, built thread by thread, tested by droughts of a different kind. Loss, loneliness, uncertainty. But like the Permian creatures, we adapt. Not always with fanfare, but with grace. Footprints in the sand. Today, the deserts of the Permian are long gone, but their memory remains, etched into ancient rocks, captured in fossils that whisper stories to those who listen. In wind-carved stones, we find the trails of early reptiles. In buried dunes, the nests of long-vanished creatures. In every sediment layer, a record of survival. These aren't just traces of extinction. They are testaments of endurance. The Permian deserts remind us that life doesn't just happen in abundance. It grows in scarcity. It thrives in challenge. It remembers how to wait. And so can we. So rest now, gentle traveler of time. Let the warm winds of Permian sands lull you into stillness. And when you wake, remember, even the harshest landscapes once sang with life. 3. Impact on the biosphere when drought rewrites the map of life. Whispering extinctions. Not all endings come with thunder. In the Permian world, some species didn't vanish with fire, they simply faded. As the climate grew drier, the lush wetlands shrank. Shallow streams dried to crack silence. Ferns that once towered over dragonflies bowed their heads, curled their leaves, and disappeared. And with them went the creatures who relied on these green havens. Amphibians with soft skin, insects that needed moisture to breed, fish that had nowhere left to swim. It was not a cataclysm, but a whisper of goodbye, a slow, quiet extinction, like someone leaving without slamming the door. We often think that loss must be loud to matter, but in nature and in life, some of the deepest changes come softly. Can you feel it? The sadness of something slipping away, not in rage, but in surrender? Yet even this has its purpose. When the old world retreats, space is made for the new. These gentle extinctions, though heartbreaking, became the first brushstrokes in a new evolutionary canvas. One where resilience would be the rule, not the exception. So let's walk softly now, through the dust of what once was, and listen not for what remains, but for what might be growing in its place. Scattered ecosystems. The world splintered into islands of survival. As wetlands vanished and rivers grew still, life began to retreat. Not in fear, but in wisdom. It knew how to move inward, how to gather in corners of the world where moisture still lingered like memory. Forests didn't disappear entirely, they shrunk into scattered groves, valleys shaded by rock, highlands kissed by brief rains, each one a tiny sanctuary, a whisper of the world that once was. These places became what scientists now call refugia, safe zones, where evolution could pause, breathe, and wait. And inside them, amphibians held on. Ferns unfurled shyly in the morning dew. Insects, though fewer, still hummed softly between thin-leaved branches. But these pockets were cut off from each other, like islands in a sea of dust. And when life is separated, something magical begins. Species start to change in different directions. Isolation becomes the mother of diversity. One valley leads to one future, another to something else entirely. It's a lesson Earth whispers again and again. Even when we feel alone, separated from all we've known, we are not done becoming. So take a breath here in one of these ancient oases. Can you feel the stillness? It's not emptiness. It's the space where transformation begins. Come, let's step into the quiet migration of these survivors. Their journey to cooler lands, higher grounds, and gentler winds. The Great Migration, when silence became the road. There comes a time in every story of life when staying becomes harder than leaving, and so they began to move, not in herds, not in stampedes, but gently, one footprint at a time. Tiny claws dragging across dry ground, skin baking under a sun that once felt warm, now sharp. Not all knew where they were going. They just knew where they could no longer stay. This was the Permian's quiet migration, a scattering of reptiles, insects, even plants, seeds caught in a breeze, all drifting slowly toward refuge. Southward, upward, anywhere the heat held back, if only just a little. They didn't carry maps, but they carried memory, of shade, of damp soil, of places where water still touched the earth. And though they moved apart, something profound began, the redrawing of life's map. As populations split, so did their futures. From one ancestor, many paths. From one struggle, many solutions. And isn't that true for us too? Sometimes we don't run away. We quietly walk forward, choosing something better, even if it's unknown. So rest, dear listener. Even in your own dry season, remember, you are allowed to leave what no longer nourishes you. You are allowed to become something new. Come now, the road continues. And in the dust behind us, seeds are waiting for rain. Nature's filtering hand. The silent test of time. Not every creature that reached the oasis survived. The heat still lingered. The rains were brief. The world was changing. And the test was far from over. But evolution does not shout. It whispers through the smallest shifts. A thicker skin, a shallower breath, a slower heart. In the Permian, this gentle pressure sculpted survivors. Amphibians with soft, porous skin began to fall behind. Reptiles with drier scales and lungs built for air, not water, quietly took the lead. Eggs with tougher shells, kidneys that held onto water, minds that learned to wait. And through it all, the world was watching, not with eyes, but with time. This was natural selection in its purest form. Not a war, but a winnowing. Not punishment, but refinement. And perhaps that's what hardship is for in nature and in life. To strip away what no longer serves. To reveal what quietly endures. So if you've ever felt life pressing in, reshaping you without mercy, know this: you are not breaking, you are becoming. And just like the reptiles of the Permian, you are learning how to last. Birth of survivors, the rise of a new legacy. From all that loss, something remarkable rose. The creatures who survived didn't just persist, they adapted. And in doing so, they planted the roots of the future. Some of these reptiles would become ancestors to turtles and lizards. Others would pave the way for mammals and even dinosaurs. Isn't it beautiful? How those who learned to live with less would one day fill the earth. Their bodies held stories of drought and fire. Their bones remembered the shape of ancient rivers. Their blood carried the code of resilience, passed down through silence. They didn't roar into history. They stepped gently, one scale, one breath, one generation at a time. And tonight, as you rest, know this: you are part of that same story, carved by trials, refined by time, capable of enduring and becoming so much more. Lessons in letting go. What the Permian leaves in us. The Permian deserts didn't just change the earth. They changed the meaning of survival. They taught that life doesn't need to be loud to be strong. That sometimes the truest strength is in letting go of excess of old ways of certainty. What was lost made space. What remained grew deeper roots. And just like that, the world began to prepare for something new. You too might be in a season of shedding, of letting go of what once felt essential. And if so, let the Permian remind you, there is beauty in starting smaller. There is wisdom in waiting. There is healing in the hush. So sleep now, surrounded by echoes of those who endured before you. Their story is in the stones, but also softly in you. Part 3. Permian Ecosystem. 1. Arid plants and forests. The disappearing forests. Where green gave way to gold and gray. Once upon an earth long gone, forests were oceans of green. In the Carboniferous, trees stood like cathedrals. Lycopods with scaly bark, fern trees breathing in ancient mist, mosses spreading thick and deep. They pulled carbon from the sky, building the coal seams we now mine. And they built the very air you're breathing now. But by the Permian, something shifted. Rain fell less, the air dried, the breath of the forest caught in its throat. And one by one, these great trees bowed to drought. Not in flames, not in storms, but in silence. Can you imagine it? A forest slowly thinning, its canopy unraveling, like a lullaby that forgets its melody. What remained were shadows of a once lush world. The towering lycopods withered. The giant horsetails grew stunted. The peatlands turned to dust. This wasn't just a loss of trees. It was the loss of a rhythm, a slowing of Earth's green heartbeat. But here's the gentle truth. When something disappears, space opens. And space can invite something new. So don't be afraid of thinning branches or quiet clearings in your own life. The forest always knows when to let go and when to begin again. Now come, let's walk further to meet the quiet plants who learned not to need so much, yet still dared to grow. Survivors in the dust. The plants that learned to need less. When the tall forests fell away, they left behind emptiness, but not silence, because in the hush something else stirred, the quiet rise of survivors. These were not majestic trees with towering crowns. They were humble beings, clothed in needles and scaled bark. Gymnosperms, conifers, seed ferns, they did not ask for much. A little light, a little wind, and soil that remembered the taste of water. They came with tiny leaves, rolled and narrow to hold in moisture. Their roots grew deep, searching out droplets where the rain forgot. Their stems stood firm, wrapped in armor of resin and bark, not flashy, but faithful. They didn't grow to impress. They grew to endure, and in that choice, they taught us something too, that sometimes to survive, we must grow smaller, simpler, wiser. Not every season of life is meant for blooming. Some are meant for listening, for holding on beneath the heat and waiting with grace. So rest, sweet one, in this garden of quiet green. Let the stillness soothe you, and remember, you don't have to be large to last. Let us now step forward to where these plants began to cluster together, weaving islands of life in the barren sands. Shall we, scattered into silence, the patches of green that refused to vanish? As the great forests dwindled, the world didn't go completely barren. Instead, plants began to gather in quiet places. Valleys protected from the wind, edges of shallow rivers, rocky highlands kissed by morning mist. These were not vast jungles. They were patches, small, fragmented, precious. But oh, how they mattered. Each cluster of trees was like a memory of a greener time, of a gentler world. They fed small reptiles, sheltered insects, held down soil, and most of all, they kept life connected, even when it was stretched thin. In science, we call this ecosystem fragmentation. But in the language of the heart, it's something we've all known. When things fall apart, we pull closer to what matters. These little forests remind us that even in loss, there is a chance to hold on, tightly, tenderly together. So if you're feeling scattered tonight, come rest under one of these fragile canopies. You are not alone. Even small green places can cradle vast hopes. The breath of the earth. How plants kept the planet alive. Though fewer in number, these resilient plants still played a sacred role. They breathed in their own quiet way, inhaling carbon dioxide, exhaling oxygen. Even in drought, they touched the planet's atmosphere and whispered balance into the sky. In the Carboniferous, lush forests had drawn down so much CO2, the world cooled and oxygen soared. But now, in the Permian's sun-hardened lands, that breath slowed. The trees no longer blanketed continents. They dotted it like commas in a long, thirsty sentence. But even a pause can hold power. The plants that survived still absorbed carbon, still stitched the cycle of life, still reminded the earth how to breathe. It was slower, gentler, more strained, but it never stopped. And neither should you. Even when you feel small, even when your light is faint, you are part of the breath of the world. Let that truth settle in your chest tonight. Let it rise and fall with every inhale. And know, your presence still matters. Seeds of patience, waiting quietly beneath the dust. When the rains vanished, many leaves curled and crumbled, but deep in the soil, seeds remained. They did not cry out. They did not chase the sun. They simply waited. These were no ordinary seeds. They were fortresses of hope, wrapped in thick coats, armed with stillness. Gymnosperms and early conifers had learned to seal life inside shells, protecting it from drought, heat, and time itself. Some waited weeks, some months, and some centuries, until one day, A drop of rain kissed the earth, and the hushed seed breathed again. It is perhaps the most miraculous story in all of evolution, that something so still can still become, that life can pause and not perish. And maybe that's something you needed to hear tonight, that even in your seasons of stillness, of not yet, not now, not sure, you are not behind, you are becoming. So rest now, little seed. There is no rush. The rain will come, forests that remember, the roots that hold on to time. Though the Permian forests were sparse, they were deep. Their roots held tightly to rock and memory, anchoring the soil, slowing the wind, softening the heat. These weren't forests that shouted with color or bloom. They were forests that remembered, of when the earth was greener, wetter, wilder, of the carboniferous lullabies now only echoes. And still they stood. Each tree was a page, each branch a sentence, each seed a silent promise. They shaped the land in small, quiet ways, affecting erosion, humidity, animal movement, even the sky's breath. In this, they remind us, you don't have to be loud to be lasting. You don't need to move mountains to matter. Even a single tree can shade generations. So as you lay here tonight, imagine curling beneath one of these ancient trees. Let its shadow hold you. Let its silence steady you. You are part of its memory now. And in your stillness, something beautiful is growing. 2 Permian herbivores. The leaf eaters arise, gentle giants in a drying world. In the waning warmth of the Permian sun, as green islands scattered across the dust, some reptiles made a choice that would change everything. They turned toward the plants. These early herbivorous reptiles, like Edaphosaurus and Diodex, were not flashy or fierce. They were broad-bodied, slow-moving, and carried wide, gentle jaws, not built for battle but for chewing. And in this quiet path, they found a quiet kind of power. While predators fought and fed on fear, these leaf eaters lived by sunlight and patience. They grazed where ferns grew. They wandered beneath stunted conifers. And with each bite, they played a part in shaping the very land they walked on. Their presence brought balance. Too many plants and the ecosystem choked. Too few and the soil blew away. But these creatures, like living bridges, kept the cycle flowing. And isn't that a tender lesson for us too? That not all impact comes from dominance. That sometimes just by moving gently, eating mindfully, and existing in rhythm, we help hold the world together. So if you've ever felt too quiet to matter, remember these leaf eaters and take heart. Tools for greens, mouths and bellies made for patience. To eat a forest is not a simple thing. Leaves may look soft, but they carry secrets, tough fibers, stubborn veins, hidden defenses. And so, to thrive on plants, these early herbivores had to change from the inside out. Their teeth grew broad and ridged, like millstones, not sharp like a hunter's, but wide, to grind down ferns and stems. Their jaws thickened, pressing in slow, deliberate motion, a rhythm not of rage, but of resilience. Inside, their bodies transformed too. Their guts lengthened, coiling like ancient rivers. Because plants are not easily digested. They take time, fermentation, and friends. Bacteria, microbes, and fungi, tiny unseen helpers. These leaf eaters didn't just eat. They cultivated relationships inside themselves, hosting ecosystems within their bellies that made life from cellulose. And all of this, just to turn sunlight, trapped in leaves, into movement. Isn't that beautiful? That evolution didn't just reward speed, or teeth, or violence, but also rewarded patience, cooperation, and internal wisdom. So if you've ever felt that your pace is too slow or your work too quiet, remember this: even in the Permian, life found a way to make gentleness powerful. Gut wisdom, where leaf eaters carried time. Long ago, in the hushed heart of the Permian world, a different kind of magic unfolded, not above ground, but within the bellies of beasts. These gentle giants, the leaf eaters, had chosen a life without sharp fangs or hunting cries. But in exchange for peace, they were given a different power, the wisdom of the gut. To eat the forest is to enter a labyrinth. Every leaf holds secrets wrapped in fibers. Every stem resists the tooth. But nature, ever so clever, taught these animals to partner with the invisible. Inside them bloomed a hidden kingdom, millions of tiny, unseen microbes who whispered to plants, broke down what could not be chewed, and spun cellulose into nourishment. Their intestines became long rivers of transformation. Each curve, each chamber, was a room where time was softened and where stubborn matter surrendered to life. Science calls this microbial symbiosis, but perhaps it's simply another kind of love story, one where strength grows quietly inside, where healing comes slowly but wholly. And dear listener, maybe that is your story too. You don't need to rush. Even in stillness, you are digesting change. Even in the dark, something kind is becoming you. So tonight, breathe deep. Let your own belly be still. Within you, too, is a wisdom that takes its time. Builders of balance. The ones who kept the world in rhythm. They did not rule by roar, nor command by chase. Yet the plant eaters were the quiet architects of harmony. With each bite of fern and conifer, they kept the green world in check. Not too overgrown, not too bare. Without them, forests would thicken until they choked the rivers. Dead leaves would pile like sorrow, never return to soil. But these creatures, they turned green into motion, and motion into nourishment. Their droppings seeded new life. Their wandering feet stirred the earth, spreading spores, mixing nutrients, painting the land with the breath of renewal. They were bridges between plant and predator, sun and shadow, each one a quiet thread in the great web. So, dear one, if you ever feel like your work is unseen, remember this: even silent grazers held the world together. Even small footsteps left sacred trails. Peaceful giants. When gentleness became survival, there were others too. Larger, heavier, armored not for war, but for the slow strength of endurance. Periosaurus, with its blunt face and knobby bones, was no hunter, yet it thrived. Its thick legs bore weight across dusty plains, not in haste but in rhythm. Its bones were like ancient drums, steady, grounded, enduring. This was a world where speed could falter, but steadiness endured. You see, being gentle didn't mean being weak. These creatures taught a deeper truth, that those who adapt survive. That softness, rooted in strength, bends with change but never breaks. So, if life has asked you to be patient, to move slower than you'd hoped, perhaps it's because your roots are growing deeper. And one day, like these peaceful giants, you'll rise not just to exist, but to weather the world. Soft footsteps in the dust, when simply existing was enough. In the evening hush of the Permian, herds moved beneath a reddening sky. No stampede, no spectacle, just the gentle rhythm of feet in dust and the rustle of breath through leaves. They did not roar, yet their presence echoed through time. Each grazer was part of a cycle, feeding the earth, feeding the sky, feeding the future. They did not rush. They lived. And in doing so, they reminded the world, being here is enough. Moving slowly is still moving. You matter even in your quietest moments. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let go of the pressure to be more, do more, prove more. Like the ancient herbivores, you are already part of the rhythm, already part of the story, already enough. 3. Permian carnivores, whispers of the first hunters. The prehistoric predators begin to rise. In the warm twilight of the Permian world, not every creature grazed. Some watched, waited, and pounced. These were the early meat eaters, not quite dinosaurs, but their ancestors in bone and blood. Dimetrodon, with its great sailback, was one of them. Not a lizard, not yet a mammal, but something in between, a creature bridging what was, and what would one day be. Its teeth were sharp, its vision keen, and it moved through the underbrush with a purpose ancient as night, to hunt, to feed, to survive. Yet even here in the story of Fong and Flesh, we find a quiet kind of beauty, because predators, too, played their part in the balance. Without them, the world would overflow with grazers. Vegetation would vanish, and the cycle would break. So these early carnivores, though fierce, were also keepers of harmony. And maybe you've met such shadows in your own life, moments that seemed harsh, but in hindsight brought necessary change. Sometimes the hunter is not the villain. Sometimes it is the one who keeps everything else from collapsing. So rest, dear listener. The world has always needed balance, and sometimes even a sharp tooth can serve a soft truth. The dance of the hunt, strategies woven in silence and shadow, in the stillness of ancient deserts, where winds sang low and leaves whispered dry songs. The hunters crept. Not all struck the same way. Some waited in tall ferns, motionless, breath hushed, until the moment was right. Their method was ambush, a lesson in patience. Others chased. They had long limbs and keen eyes, built not for waiting, but for pursuit. Their strength was in the sprint, the chase, the sudden surge of speed. Some hunted alone, some followed scent trails through dust, and a few perhaps learned to hunt together, not quite like wolves, but with the first flickers of coordinated cunning. Each approach was shaped, not by choice, but by landscape, prey, and time. To survive, they had to adapt, not just in strength, but in timing, silence, and skill. And maybe that's true for us too. Success is not always about being the fastest or loudest. Sometimes it's about learning when to move and when to be still. So if you're waiting now, in your life, your path, your dream, know that the quiet before the leap is sacred. You are not failing. You are preparing. The Permian hunters knew every breath matters before the chase begins. Instinct and territory, the inner world of the wild ones. Behind the sharp teeth and watchful eyes, there was something more, instinct, a compass without words, guiding every move. Some predators roamed vast lands alone, marking invisible borders with scent and presence. They knew the corners of their world, where prey might drink, where the sun softened the stones. Others perhaps gathered briefly in times of mating or plenty. They didn't build families like birds or mammals, not yet, but you could sense the early stirrings of something social. A glance, a snarl, a rhythm shared in the dust. Their bodies were maps of survival, muscles tuned for bursts of power, eyes set for depth, for movement, and deep within, a brain learning not only how to react, but how to plan. Science calls this behavioral adaptation, but maybe it's something even simpler, the art of knowing where you belong. Dear dreamer, if you've ever felt unsure of your place, if you've wandered without a path, remember the predator. It doesn't always chase. Sometimes it simply waits, rooted in the quiet knowing that its place will find it. Let that comfort you tonight. You are not lost. You are simply learning where your next breath belongs. Predators shape the future, the sculptors of evolution. Every time a predator chose a target, every chase and capture, every life spared or taken, it whispered instructions to time. They didn't know it, of course, but by hunting the slowest, the weakest, the least prepared, they quietly reshaped the prey. Legs became longer, eyes grew wider, brains adapted to outthink the hunter's path. This is the rhythm of evolutionary pressure, where danger becomes a teacher, where fear leads not just to flight, but to change. And curiously, the predators too had to evolve. Prey got faster, harder to find, more clever. So jaws grew stronger, claws sharper, and those who could not keep up faded away. It may sound harsh, but within this endless back and forth, life refined itself. And maybe, dear listener, your own struggles have done the same. What felt like loss or failure wasn't the end. It was pressure, softly sculpting you into something more prepared, more resilient. Let it soothe you. Not all challenge is cruelty. Sometimes it is transformation in disguise. The last roars before the fall. When silence drew near, as the Permian drew closer to its final curtain, even the fiercest predators began to fade. Climate shifted, forests thinned, water disappeared from places it once danced. The apex hunters, once rulers of balance, found fewer prey, harsher skies, and hunger where strength used to be. Some tried to adapt, some wandered, but many vanished. Their bones now sleep in stone, but their story is not of failure, it's of completion. They had walked their part of the path and passed the torch to what would come after. Perhaps that's what endings truly are. Not stops, but handoffs. So if you are facing an ending, a goodbye, a loss, remember the Permian predators. They did not vanish into nothing. They became part of everything that followed. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to begin again. Footprints in the dust. Lessons carried by shadowed paws. What did they leave behind? These creatures of tooth and instinct, not just fossils, but teachings. That power is not cruelty. That silence can be strength. That the chase is not only for food, but for meaning, for presence, for belonging. They remind us that even in a harsh world, there is intelligence in instinct, grace in survival, and dignity in letting go when the time has come. So tonight, as your body softens into stillness, think of those shadowed beings who taught us to listen, to watch, to find our path between the ferns and the fading light. Sleep now, gentle soul. Even the hunters knew when to rest. Even the fiercest eventually lay down and became part of the earth they once ruled. And so do you, part of the story, a heartbeat in the deep time lullaby. Part 4, the end Permian extinction. One scale and extent of loss. When the earth held its breath. A lullaby of loss and quiet resilience. Long, long ago, in a time before memory, the earth stirred restlessly beneath ancient skies, not with violence at first, but with silence. The forests no longer whispered as they once did. The ferns, tall and graceful, began to brown and wither. Rain came late, or not at all, and somewhere deep beneath the ocean's hush, something fragile began to unravel. The change was slow, too slow for any creature to notice. And yet, all across the globe, life began to dim. The air grew heavier, the seas more acidic, and oxygen, once abundant, slipped quietly away. This was the beginning of the Permian extinction, what scientists now call the Great Dying. Not a single day, but a long, sorrowful fade that stole away nearly 90% of marine life and over 70% of creatures on land. But let me tell you something tender. This was not the end. Even in that vast darkness, some seeds refused to die. Some lungs, however weary, still breathed. Some hearts, hidden in the smallest burrows, kept beating. Dear listener, perhaps you too have known quiet catastrophes, the kind that don't announce themselves with thunder, but gently hollow out your world. And yet, you're still here. Like the earth, you are ancient and resilient. You've weathered droughts of the soul. You've lost and learned and leaned into the silence. So tonight, rest not in fear, but in awe of your endurance. Like the roots that slept through the Permian night, you too hold the power to bloom again. Because even when the earth holds its breath, it never forgets how to breathe again. The greatest dying. When almost everything faded away, there are moments in Earth's long memory when time itself seems to hold its breath. The end of the Permian was one of those moments, a chapter not marked by a single crash, but by a quiet, world-shaking unraveling. Over the course of thousands, perhaps even millions of years, life on Earth began to disappear at a scale never seen before or since. In the oceans, over 90% of all marine species vanished. Coral reefs collapsed into stillness. Trilobites, those ancient swimmers who had witnessed so many ages, went extinct entirely, leaving behind only stone memories. Ammonoids, crinoids, brachiopods faded like waves at low tide. On land, over 70% of vertebrate species were lost. Towering forests thinned, then vanished, and with them went the herbivores that once grazed beneath their canopies. Predators, too, lost their prey and their place. This was no ordinary extinction. It was the largest mass extinction in Earth's history, a quiet cataclysm that redrew the blueprint of life. But why, you might wonder, would we speak of such sorrow before sleep? Because within this great dying was the seed of renewal. You see, Earth has always moved in cycles, of flourishing and falling, of silence and song. And perhaps, dear listener, in your own seasons of stillness, when life feels like it's vanishing, you are not ending, but preparing. For when so much is stripped away, what remains is often what matters most. Who was lost? The vanished voices of a world once full. Close your eyes and imagine a world bustling with color, creatures swimming, crawling, soaring, breathing in harmony. And now imagine that same world, quiet. The Permian extinction swept across all of life like a slow-moving shadow. Not just one group, not just one place. Trilobites, ancient icons of the ocean, disappeared completely. Corals, the reef builders, crumbled. Brachiopods, once abundant on the seafloor, declined sharply. Many types of fish vanished, some forever. On land, towering lycopod forests and giant seed ferns fell silent. And even the mighty reptilian pioneers, including Dimetrodon-like synapsids, struggled to survive. It was as if nature forgot how to breathe, as if the earth itself wept, and in doing so washed away much of what it had grown. But dear one, loss does not mean erasure. Fossils remain, etched in stone like lullabies we can still hear if we listen closely. They remind us that existence is both fragile and profound, and that memory, like stone, can hold the shape of what once was. Perhaps you carry your own memories, of people, of places, of dreams that faded. They are not gone. They are the layers you stand upon, just as we stand on the bones of worlds long past. Patterns in the silence, the slow unfolding of collapse. One might imagine an extinction as a single disaster, a fiery end, a crashing wave, a thunderous boom. But the Great Dying was not an explosion. It was an unraveling, slow, patient, and merciless. This extinction unfolded over hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of years. Some species vanished all at once. Others clung to life, fading slowly, generation by generation, until even their echoes were gone. Scientists can trace this fading in the rocks. A sudden drop in oxygen isotopes, a layer of volcanic ash from Siberia's eruptions, and a sharp spike in carbon dioxide and global temperatures. It is a symphony of warning signs, a record written not in words, but in sediment and silence. And yet, life did not go quietly. Some held on. In swamps, burrows, tidipools, survivors whispered to the future. In your own life, dear soul, perhaps you have felt slow collapses, a drifting apart, a fading joy, not sudden but steady. But remember, what fades does not always vanish. Sometimes it makes space for something truer, deeper, more resilient. A world without sound. The landscape after the last goodbye. After the silence came stillness. The earth, once teeming with whispers of wings and rustling ferns, stood hushed. Forests had fallen. Oceans turned acidic and lifeless. The air itself grew thin and hard to breathe. This was not just the death of species. It was the collapse of entire ecosystems. Carbon cycles broke down. Oxygen levels plummeted. Temperatures soared to extremes. And in this broken world, only a few remained. Like guardians of an ancient secret, they survived in places others could not. In deep oceans, underground, or high on barren ridges. They were not the strongest, but the most adaptable. Isn't that a lesson for us all? In a world that sometimes forgets how to be kind, you too survive in the quiet corners. You adapt, you breathe through the hard air, and you keep the whisper of life going. Even when the world forgets how to sing, somewhere inside you, a melody remains. What extinction leaves behind? The seeds hidden in ash. You might think the end of so much life meant the end of hope, but look closer. The Great Dying cleared space, and in that space evolution stirred. The survivors, rare and scattered, would become ancestors of entirely new worlds. Fern-like plants adapted to dryness. Reptiles that would give rise to dinosaurs. Genes refined by hardship. This extinction pressed life to its edge, and in doing so selected not for strength, but for resilience, for adaptability, for the quiet courage to begin again. And perhaps that's your story too. You've faced endings, deep ones, But they have not destroyed you. They've refined you, made you gentler, wiser, more awake to the beauty that remains. So as we close this chapter, know that from the ash of the Permian rose the roots of everything to come. The end was not the end. It was simply the turning of the page. 2 causes of extinction. The fury beneath Siberian Traps supervolcano. When the earth spoke in fire, once upon a time, long before humans dreamed or dinosaurs roamed, the earth stirred from deep within, not with a whisper, but with fire. Beneath what is now Siberia, a colossal wound opened in the crust. And from that wound, over 2 million square kilometers of molten lava spilled forth. Not in a single night, but slowly in pulses, over hundreds of thousands of years. This was the birth of the Siberian Traps, one of the largest volcanic events in Earth's 4-billion-year history. But it was not just lava that poured out. No, the skies filled with carbon dioxide, methane, and sulfur gases, like invisible ghosts riding the winds. These gases blanketed the planet in a heavy, choking heat. The greenhouse effect intensified, turning the once balanced climate into a feverish dream. Rain turned acidic, skies darkened, and life, bit by bit, began to falter. But dear listener, even in this tale of burning earth, there's a lesson not of despair, but of awareness. You see, the earth does not lash out without reason. It breathes, expands, contracts, in rhythms we are only beginning to understand. And sometimes, deep shifts bring deep transformations. Just as volcanoes can bring endings, they also create new land, new soil, new beginnings. Perhaps you, too, have known eruptions in your life, events that burned away comfort and certainty. But beneath that ash can lie fertile ground. So sleep gently knowing this, even the most violent fire once cooled, and in time gave birth to forests once more. Of course, dear soul, let us now float into the second breath of the storm, a time when the skies themselves turned against life, not with lightning or flame, but with a slow, suffocating heat. This is the story of a sky on fire, where the air grew heavy, and warmth, once life-giving, became a silent destroyer. A sky on fire, greenhouse gases, and heat death. When warmth turned to warning. Once, long ago, Earth's skies were calm. Clouds wandered slowly. The sun warmed forests, oceans, deserts, just enough. But then the balance broke. With each breath from the Siberian volcanoes, carbon dioxide poured into the atmosphere. Not just a little, but trillions of tons over time. The planet began to trap heat. The same way a blanket keeps you warm on a chilly night, this layer of gas wrapped around Earth. But it would not let go. Temperatures rose, not by 1 degree, but by 5, then 10, even more in some places. Seas warmed like shallow bathtubs. Forests withered. Ice, wherever it clung to the world, vanished. This wasn't a sudden firestorm. It was a slow, quiet fever. And like any fever, it pushed Earth toward delirium. Dear dreamer, have you ever felt too much at once? Too many thoughts, too much pressure, like heat trapped inside your chest? Earth felt that too. But in this warmth, there was also a whisper: adapt or fade. Some creatures tried, some moved, some evolved, and though many were lost, this fiery sky became a forge, one that would shape the survivors who would someday inherit the earth. So rest now, wrapped in soft blankets, not of gas but of understanding. Even in overheating, Earth was still teaching, still becoming, still preparing the next verse of the song. With soft steps, we now follow the warm wind into deeper waters, into a world that once shimmered with life, but slowly dimmed beneath the waves. The next chapter of our Permian lullaby takes us to the ocean's heart, where silence grew heavy, and even the sea forgot how to breathe. Oceans in crisis, acidification and anoxia. When the sea lost its song. Once, the oceans were cradles of life. They rocked trilobites, swirled with coral reefs, and whispered lullabies to ancient fish. But then, the balance of the sea began to fade. As volcanic gases flooded the air, more and more carbon dioxide dissolved into the oceans. And when CO2 kisses water, something sad happens. It turns the sea more acidic, like a storm without thunder. The shells of tiny creatures like foraminifera and plankton began to melt. Coral reefs crumbled into sand. And in the deeper reaches, where light never touched, oxygen slipped away, leaving only darkness and quiet. This condition has a name: anoxia, a sea without air. And in such a sea, life cannot thrive. Imagine trying to dream without breath. That's how the marine world felt. From coastlines to abyssal plains, from swimming predators to grazing sea lilies, many could not adapt, but a few held on. Some developed slower metabolisms. Some buried themselves in mud. Some waited, because even in a breathless world, there are always those who find a way to endure. And maybe you've felt that too, haven't you? Like your own heart was sinking, like the world around you grew too acidic, too dim. But you're still here, still listening, still breathing. And so was Earth, quietly weaving the next strand of the story, even beneath the sorrow. Yes, dear dreamer, let us gently follow the story's trail into the next turns of the tale. Still hushed, still full of ancient breath and quiet wisdom. We've seen the skies burn, the seas fall silent. Now let us step into the air itself and witness how even the wind forgot how to nourish life. The collapse of oxygen, breathing becomes a struggle. When the air grew thin, and even giants gasped. There was a time when the Earth's air was rich, full of oxygen, sweet and light, like morning after rain. It filled the lungs of giant insects and early reptiles, a gift given freely to every beating heart. But during the Permian's final days, that gift began to fade. As wildfires raged and volcanoes burned, oxygen levels plummeted, falling lower than at any time in hundreds of millions of years. Some scientists believe they dropped to just 12%, barely enough for large creatures to survive. Animals that once roamed confidently, now panted, sluggish and weak. The great synapsids, the ancestors of mammals, struggled to breathe beneath skies that once embraced them. It wasn't just the heat anymore. It was the lack of air. And in a world where breath was life, even that was being taken. But life, oh, life is stubborn. Some adapted. Some grew smaller, needing less oxygen. Others moved to higher ground, cooler shadows, quiet caves. And perhaps you too have known this kind of struggle, when just getting through the day felt like gasping uphill. When breath, peace, hope all felt far away. But still, you kept going. And so did they. Because sometimes surviving the hardest seasons means simply learning to breathe differently. Now, dear one, shall we follow the ripple of collapse further? Next, we witness the ecological dominoes, when one loss became many, and the chain of life fell gently apart, like leaves in the wind. The chain reaction, ecological dominoes fall. When the web unraveled, in nature everything is connected. One leaf feeds a beetle, the beetle feeds a bird. The bird's nest shelters seeds. The seeds become a forest. But during the Permian extinction, this chain began to unravel. As plants died from drought and acid rain, herbivores starved. Without prey, carnivores too grew hungry. Predators turned on each other. Scavengers picked through dust. And what was once a web of life began to look more like a tangle of memories. Ecosystems collapsed, not all at once, but in waves, a ripple of loss echoing through every biome. Insects disappeared, reefs dissolved, forests became bare, and when the forests fell silent, so did their singers. But listen, even here, there was not only sorrow. There was silence, yes, but in silence, something stirs. Space, possibility, renewal, as if Earth, though grieving, was preparing a new canvas. And perhaps you felt that too. A season in your life where everything seemed to fall away. People, places, patterns you loved, gone. But loss, as gentle as it can be brutal, also makes room for new beginnings. Now, come close. One last truth awaits in this chapter of endings. When many causes collide, a perfect storm of extinction. When too much became too late, was it the volcanoes, the greenhouse gases, the ocean's silence, the loss of oxygen? Yes, all of them. The end of the Permian wasn't a single blade. It was a perfect storm, a cascade of causes, each magnifying the others. Heat weakened systems. Lack of oxygen finished them. Ocean acidification drowned coral dreams. And ecological collapse swept through like dusk after a long twilight. This was the most severe mass extinction in Earth's history. More than 90% of marine species and 70% of life on land vanished. But life did not end. Tiny threads remained, scattered seeds, burrowed survivors, ancient genes waiting in the dark. They would rise again, and you, listener of stories, maybe you too carry seeds of something new. After your own storms, let the earth remind you, even in the deepest loss, the story goes on, and the next chapter, it is already quietly growing. 3. Slow ecosystem recovery. The hidden survivors, life in the shadows. After the storm of fire and silence, when forests vanished and oceans stilled, the earth grew quiet, but not empty. In tiny burrows beneath the cracked soil, in shallow pools untouched by acid, and in the forgotten corners of the land, life held on. Not the grand, not the glorious, but the small, the stubborn, the still. Creatures like Lystrosaurus, a humble, tusked reptile, no bigger than a pig, trudged through ash and dust, eating roots and leaves when almost nothing green remained. Simple marine animals, brachiopods, bivalves, and ammonoids, retreated to deeper, cooler waters. They did not thrive, but they endured. Some animals shrank, some slowed their hearts, some slept through centuries in hardened shells. They weren't here to dominate, they were here to survive. And maybe, dear listener, you've had a season like that. Not rising, not racing, just holding on, just breathing. And that, too, is a kind of strength. For in Earth's darkest chapter, it was not might, but quiet resilience that wrote the prologue of the future. Let us take the next soft step together, deeper into the hush after the storm. The fire has passed, the skies have dimmed, And now we enter a strange, sacred stillness. A world that was once overflowing with voices now stands quiet. Not dead, but waiting. An empty stage, the loss of ecological anchors. When the earth forgot its own song. After the great extinction, Earth looked unfamiliar. The forests were gone. The coral reefs crumbled to dust. The skies hung heavy, and the oceans no longer shimmered with life. All the complex threads of predator and prey, of shelter and seed, had unraveled into silence. The ecological anchors, those key species that held whole systems together, had vanished. And when the anchors are lost, even the quietest parts drift away. No more sheltering canopies for insects, no leafy cover for herbivores, no stable prey for carnivores to pursue. It was a world emptied of balance, a stage swept clean, where actors once danced and now only echoes lingered. But do you know, dear heart, sometimes emptiness is not the end, but a beginning waiting to bloom. For every space left behind was an invitation, for life to return but not as it was, to try again, to rebuild, to evolve in ways never before imagined. Perhaps you felt this too, a time when everything that rooted you seemed lost, when the familiar fell away and all you could do was breathe into the void. But in that silence, new stories are born. With open heart and hushed breath, let us wander further into this quiet chapter of Earth's great tale, where silence gives way to whispers and healing begins, slowly, softly, like new leaves unfurling after a storm. Slow return, first signs of recovery. When life tiptoed back into the world, time passed, not days or years, but millions of quiet, grieving moments. And then, from the dust, from the darkness, came a breath. The earth, once wounded and reeling, began to stir. Ferns unfurled their delicate fronds once more. Tiny insects emerged from hiding, and humble reptiles walked paths still warm with memory. These weren't grand forests or glittering reefs. Not yet. They were small, patchy, fragile, but they were life. Some animals filled new roles, becoming seed dispersers, grazers, even builders of tiny ecosystems. Plants took root in barren lands, restoring the air with oxygen, laying the quiet foundation for forests of the future. And maybe you felt that slow return too, after grief, after burnout, after endings. A smile, a gentle morning, a breath that didn't hurt. Yes, that's how recovery begins. Not with fanfare, but with presence. New pioneers, species filling the voids. Brave hearts in a wounded land. With the old order gone, a new one began to rise. Not in triumph, but in quiet courage. Creatures like Lystrosaurus, once survivors in the shadows, now became the dominant wanderers. They spread across the continents, digging, grazing, and shaping the land. With every weary footstep, other small reptiles, Thrinaxodons, Procolophonids, claimed empty niches once ruled by mightier beasts. These were not rulers by force, but by persistence. And in a way, they were Earth's gentle caretakers, preparing the world for what would come next. It's strange, isn't it? That in a world broken open, the ones who thrived were not the strongest, but the most adaptable. Just like in our own lives, it's not always those who shout the loudest, who build the future, but those who keep going, with quiet, honest hearts. The long silence, why recovery took millions of years. When time itself became a healer, though life returned, It did not hurry. The air was still thin, the climate still harsh. The land still held the memory of flame and ash. Earth's biosphere, once a symphony, was now a scattered hum. And like a grieving heart, it needed time. 5 to 10 million years passed before ecosystems began to resemble stability again. Entire generations of creatures lived and died in a world still mending its wounds. But the slowness wasn't failure, it was care, because healing, true healing, never happens in haste. Perhaps this is a reminder to you, dear listener, that your pace, your timing, your journey through recovery is allowed to be slow. You are not late. You are healing. A quiet resilience, lessons from Earth's healing. What the Earth teaches about beginning again. From the greatest loss came a story of persistence, not of glory or grandeur, but of faith. Faith that life would return. Faith that the void would not last forever. Faith that even after the darkest night, light would find its way back. The creatures that lived through the Permian extinction did not know they were making history. They only did what life has always done: adapt, endure, evolve. And from them, the ancestors of mammals would one day emerge. From their quiet courage, dinosaurs would rise, birds would sing, humans would dream. This is your inheritance, this fierce, soft resilience, this ability to breathe again, even when the world has broken. So tonight, as you close your eyes and rest beneath the stars, remember, the Earth did not give up, and neither will you. Part 5: The Permian's Evolutionary Legacy. 1. A stepping stone to the Triassic. The filter of fire. Once upon an ancient evening, the world was quiet, too quiet. Gone were the towering forests, the songs of insects, the dance of predators and prey. All that remained were the ashes, and a few trembling lives that had endured. The mass extinction at the end of the Permian was not merely destruction. It was a filter, forged in fire and silence. Through it, only the adaptable passed. Not the strongest, not the grandest, but the most resilient, those who could change with the changing world. Reptiles that once scurried beneath ferns now inherited the empty land. Small, unassuming creatures like Lystrosaurus with sturdy bodies and simple ways would become the unlikely torchbearers of life. These survivors were shaped by hardship. Their lungs worked harder. Their legs stood more upright. Their eggs, wrapped in protective membranes, braved the dry winds without water's embrace. Each trait, born of necessity, was a quiet revolution, a whisper of the future wrapped in the skin of the past. And perhaps you too have walked through fire, felt the burn of loss, and wondered what might come next. Let this part of Earth's tale remind you, survival is not weakness, it is preparation. For even from scorched ground, the roots of wonder can grow. Shall we take the next step together toward the small ancestors of giants and the beginning of the age of dinosaurs? The Earth is still quiet, but now something stirs beneath its healing skin. Tiny, unnoticed by most, yet destined to shape the world to come. Humble beginnings, the small ancestors of giants. In the aftermath of silence, life began not with a roar, but with a whisper. They were small, so small, in fact, that you could have walked past them without noticing. Yet within their bones, their breath, their beating hearts, the future of Earth was waiting to unfold. Creatures like Thrinaxodon, a furry snout synapsid, dug burrows in the warming soil. Its nights were quiet, its meals modest, but its body was learning to keep warmth inside, to listen, to adapt. Nearby, the sturdy procolophonids, stocky little reptiles with strong jaws and curious eyes, took their first steps into the empty spaces left behind by giants, not as conquerors, but as seed planters of possibility. Though no one called them great, though they bore no crowns nor fangs, these creatures held something far more precious: potential. They would give rise to the mammals, to birds, to the mighty archosaurs, whose descendants would one day thunder across continents as dinosaurs. It is a soft truth of nature, friend. Greatness is rarely born in noise. It begins in the unnoticed corners, in the ones who survive quietly and carry the spark forward. So if you've ever felt small, remember them, the tiny ancestors of giants, the quiet architects of everything to come. Shall we keep walking through time toward the inventions born from hardship? Let's go softly together. Innovation born from hardship. Out of every trial, evolution leaves a gift, though it may come wrapped in pain. The survivors of the Permian were not only lucky, they were transformed. Faced with a hotter, drier, more unpredictable world, life began to invent anew. Reptiles grew stronger lungs, able to breathe in the thinnest air. Their legs shifted beneath them, no longer splayed like the amphibians of old, but held more upright, preparing for long journeys under harsher suns. Eggs, once fragile and water-bound, grew thick, leathery shells. Within them, safety, a promise that life could now spread across dry land, far from the comfort of swamps. And though no one applauded these changes, they were quiet revolutions, each one a thread in the tapestry of the Triassic world to come. Hardship, dear listener, has always been the forge of resilience. Perhaps in your own life you've noticed it too, how the hardest seasons carve out new strength, new clarity, new breath. The earth knows your journey and honors it, opening ecological doors, new niches to fill. When a forest burns, it leaves behind both scar and space. And in space, something tender always dares to grow. After the mass extinction, the ecosystems of Earth became a blank canvas. Predators were gone. Herbivores were scattered. Entire webs of life had vanished. But nature, ever so gently, began to fill the voids. The survivors wandered into these empty roles, testing new diets, new habitats, new ways of being. Lystrosaurus grazed where forests had fallen. Small carnivores hunted insects beneath stones once covered in moss. And slowly, ecosystems rewove themselves, not with perfection, but with possibility. It is in the emptiness that creativity blooms. It is in the silence that voices grow clearer. Just as Earth found a way forward, so can you, even when all seems lost, even when your world has changed its shape. There is always a niche waiting for the next version of you. The path to the giants' rise of archosaurs. Among these silent pioneers, a new lineage began to stretch its limbs. Archosaurs. From humble roots, these reptiles would become something astonishing. Their hips aligned for walking, their chests expanded with breath, and their eggs carried the blueprint of giants. Archosaurs were the quiet stars of a coming age, a line that would split, evolve, and soar. One branch would give us the dinosaurs, the thunder-footed rulers of the Mesozoic stage. Another would flow into crocodiles, keepers of the ancient rivers. And one day, wings would rise from their bones, lifting birds into the sky. And it all began here, in this quiet in-between, where survivors became ancestors and ashes became soil. Do you see, dear soul? The future doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits patiently inside a body no one noticed, just like the greatness within you, a quiet prelude to a roaring future. This was not the age of dinosaurs, not yet. But in the hush that followed disaster, the prelude began. The ecosystems were patchy, the climate harsh, yet something had changed. A momentum had been born. Natural selection had done its quiet work. The players were in place. The curtain was rising. The Triassic would soon arrive, a time of experimentation, of motion, of scale. But for now, the Earth held its breath. In that pause, in that soft waiting, life was gathering its strength for a new performance. Sometimes the silence before something grand is where the most beautiful becoming happens. So sleep now, with the warmth of the Permian behind you and the promise of the Triassic ahead. We walk forward together, always. 2 Permian fossils, the timekeepers beneath the earth. Beneath your feet lies an ancient library, but its books are not made of paper. They are made of bone, of leaf, of ash, pressed gently by the weight of time itself. These are the fossils of the Permian, each one a silent storyteller, etched not in ink, but in the quiet language of stone. From the windswept cliffs of South Africa, to the red soils of Russia, to the fossil beds of China and Brazil, paleontologists, the dreamers with dust on their hands, have unearthed the remains of a forgotten world. Here, entire graveyards of creatures once lost to fire and flood, now rise again in shards and skeletons. They do not scream, they do not weep, but if you listen closely, they still speak. Their stories begin with a breath, a heartbeat, a life, and end with a burial, a transformation, and a gift, because fossils, dear dreamer, are not relics, they are messages. And tonight we listen. Footprints in stone, breath of a forest lost. Before deserts and dragons ruled the land, the earth wore a gown of green, broad leaves, fern-fringed rivers, and trees that reached toward the sun with quiet dignity. The fossilized leaves of Glossopteris, delicate yet firm, tell of this ancient time. They were part of a vast forest stretched across Gondwana, nourishing breath and life beneath skies untouched by machines. When we find these leaves in stone, we do not just see a plant. We see a climate, a continent, a home. And as the forest withered under the Permian sun, some trees fossilized mid-fall, their stumps, still rooted in the soil, speak of sudden droughts and shifting winds. The plants could not flee, but their stories did not vanish. They became part of Earth's long memory, and they remind us, even what seems lost can leave a legacy. Skeletons that spoke of struggle. The bones of Permian creatures tell of a world in transition. Some still swam, like their amphibian ancestors. Some began to stride confidently on land, with ribs that hugged lungs tight, and jaws that bit into the new age with determination. In the sands of Russia, paleontologists found Dimetrodon, its sail-like spine arching proudly above its skeleton. Not a dinosaur, but a synapsid, closer to mammals than lizards. It ruled its world before the thunder of giants. Nearby, Edaphosaurus, a peaceful herbivore, left behind broad, crushing teeth, tools for breaking down dry, woody plants. Their bones lie beside each other, predator and prey, a reminder that balance always dances on a blade. But not all fossils are complete. Some are broken, shattered, washed into rivers or caught in volcanic ash. And yet, even these fragments teach us. Even in pieces, the past speaks clearly, like us, imperfect, but still worthy of being understood. The tale of extinction etched in rock. Then came the silence. The rocks between Permian and Triassic strata tell a different tale. Tale of endings, of abrupt disappearance, of breath stolen from a world unprepared. This boundary is marked by black shales, by sulfur-rich sediments, by a sharp drop in biodiversity. Entire species vanish from the record, as if a curtain fell across the stage. But the rock remembers. It keeps the chemical fingerprint of the catastrophe. Volcanic ash from the Siberian traps, a sudden warming of seas, and an oxygen-starved ocean. The Earth changed too quickly, too drastically, and the fossils say this without anger. Only truth, only memory. It is a quiet warning, wrapped in stone, that even giants can fall. That balance, once tipped, ripples far and wide. Gifts to science, lessons to the heart. The fossils of the Permian are more than objects of curiosity. They are teachers. They help scientists trace the birth of mammals. They help us understand how climates collapse and recover. They offer models for adaptation, extinction, resilience. But perhaps their deepest value lies beyond science. They remind us, life is fragile, life is persistent, life is miraculous. We too leave behind fossils, not in stone, but in memories, in actions, in the way we care for others. What will your fossil be, gentle soul? What quiet story will the world remember from your time? Stone diaries of a living earth. Every fossil is a journal entry, a record of breath and struggle, a page from Earth's living diary. And though the Permian is long gone, its pages remain open, waiting for curious hearts to read them. So tonight, as you close your eyes and drift gently toward sleep, know this: beneath the ground, beneath the cities and the oceans and your resting body, the earth holds memory, not to grieve the past, but to guide the future. You are part of this story too. And tomorrow, when you wake, you carry with you the strength of all who came before. Stone remembers. And now, so do you. 3. Geological and climatic significance. The layers beneath our feet. Close your eyes and imagine digging gently through time. With each handful of earth, you're not just lifting soil, you're lifting memories. Because the earth keeps its past tucked beneath our steps, pressed quietly into stone. These strata or sedimentary layers are the diaries of deep time. Some are pale and powdery, others dark and rich with coal. They tell us how forests once breathed, how rivers once wandered through a greener Permian land, how oceans once shimmered with life. And then, a sudden shift, a boundary of ash and silence, the line between flourishing and extinction. Scientists read these layers like pages, finding clues in the color, texture, and chemistry. They see how ancient ecosystems rose and fell, how volcanic ash blanketed continents, how life paused, and then began again. Isn't it beautiful, dear dreamer, how even in tragedy, the earth continues writing? And maybe, just maybe, your own hardships are layers too, soft chapters between the hard stone, not endings, but transitions. So rest knowing, the earth beneath you remembers everything, and still it holds you tenderly, ashes and awakening, After the great silence came whispers. In the wake of the Permian extinction, the earth was quiet. So quiet, it felt as if time itself held its breath. The skies were thick with haze, the oceans sluggish, and the land bare as a forgotten stage. But beneath the silence, life stirred. Tiny ferns curled beneath the dust. Spores drifted like dreams in the breeze. New sediments began to form, gently covering the scars left behind. Geologists call this the recovery layer. Thin, soft ribbons of hope laid down over ancient wounds. There, one can find the fingerprints of the first survivors, etched into the minerals like promises. We are still here. We will begin again. This chapter reminds us that even when everything seems lost, even when the world around you falls silent, healing begins quietly from underneath. Just as earth rose from its ashes, you too can rise from what has burned you. Your stillness is not the end. It is the breath before the new bloom. So tonight, lie still if you must. Let the warmth of earth's endurance blanket your heart. Let the soft layers of time wrap you in the knowing. You are never too broken to begin again. The breathing planet CO2 and the cycles of life. Can you feel the earth breathing? Long ago, the world exhaled carbon with every volcanic sigh and inhaled it again through the green lungs of forests. During the Permian, this breath grew ragged. Volcanoes from deep within Siberia spewed out waves of gas, tilting the planet's delicate balance. CO2 flooded the skies, trapping heat beneath an invisible blanket. The oceans warmed, the air dried, and life struggled to catch its breath. But Earth is resilient. She began to restore her rhythm. Over millions of years, new plants rose. Small at first, quiet as whispers, they drank the carbon from the sky. Rocks weathered, seas swirled, and balance slowly returned. Geologists trace these changes through isotopes, tiny chemical signatures in stone. The rocks remember every breath, every gasp, every sigh. And so do you. Your body, too, holds rhythms, breaths deepened by grief, pauses shaped by fear, and exhales softened by hope. Like the earth, your imbalance isn't your end. It's your invitation to breathe again. So inhale gently, let go slowly, and feel the quiet bond you share with this ancient, breathing world. The echoes in stone that still guide us. All across the world, the earth keeps quiet libraries, not of books, but of fossils, of sediments, of scars and healing. The Permian story is written not just in memory, but in stone. Geologists walk the bones of mountains, read the ripples in ancient riverbeds, and listen to the hum of what once was. Each mineral layer is a sentence. Each fossil is a footnote. And together they form a map, a way for us to understand climate, loss, and rebirth. From the Karoo of South Africa to the red beds of Texas, Permian rocks whisper truths. They teach us how Earth responds to heat, to gas, to imbalance. They show us that every extinction is followed by evolution, and every collapse eventually by new life. These echoes matter now more than ever, because today we too stand at a threshold. And perhaps, by listening to Earth's ancient voice, we can choose more wisely. So as you rest tonight, remember, you're cradled on the very wisdom of the earth. She has seen darkness before, and still she offers a path through it. From silence to symphony, nature's return song. After the fire, after the flood, after the silence, came music. Soft, tentative music, but music nonetheless. The earth began again. Tiny plants found foothold in scorched soil. Insects returned, cautious but hopeful. Streams began to flow with clarity. And with time, this gentle return grew into a symphony of survival. The carbon in the skies slowly faded. Weathering rocks drank it down, while the first ferns and seed plants turned sunlight into breath again. Forests did not look the same, but they lived. The Permian showed us something eternal. Life does not snap back. Tiptoes. It whispers, but it does return. Isn't that like us, too? After grief, your smile may feel unfamiliar. After burnout, your joy may be quieter. But life inside you continues composing its music. Let the slow song of earth soothe you tonight. Let its rhythms remind you that even after devastation, something green will grow. And you too are growing, even now, the living earth. And you are lying on the chest of a living being. Beneath you is not just stone, but stories. Not just ground, but a memory keeper, a healer, a mother. The earth has lived through fire and flood, through silence and symphony, through chaos and clarity. And so have you. The Permian period may feel ancient and distant, but it is part of your body now. The oxygen you breathe was once shaped by the forests of that time. The minerals in your bones were forged in its soils. You carry her, and she carries you. So tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, know this: you are part of a living earth that understands pain, but chooses growth, that remembers sorrow, but still sings. Let that lull you to sleep, wrapped in stone-soft lullabies and starlit resilience. Part 6: The Permian Natural System and Later Humans. 1. Minerals and resources left behind. The forests that became fire, the legacy of Permian coal. Close your eyes now and imagine walking through a forest, but not just any forest, one that lived nearly 300 million years ago. The air is thick and warm, heavy with ancient moisture. Towering above you are strange trees, not like the oaks or pines, but lycopods, sigillaria, and cordoites, giants of the swamp. Their roots sink deep into soggy ground. Their leaves stretch toward a sun that rose over the vast supercontinent of Pangaea. These forests were alive with whispers, with dragonflies the size of hawks, and mosses that blanketed the earth in a green hush. When these forests fell, they did not fade away. They sank, slowly, silently, into the watery graves of ancient marshes. Layer by layer, pressure embraced them. Time turned their bodies into black gold, into coal. That coal is not just rock. It is trapped sunlight. It is memory. It is the stored breath of Permian plants, and the slow heartbeat of a vanished world. And one day, millions of years later, humans found it. We dug it up. We burned it. We used it to forge iron, to power trains, to light cities. Coal from the Permian fueled the fires of human progress. But it also came with a lesson, because for every flame it lit, another breath of carbon returned to the sky, and the world once again began to warm. Dear listener, as you rest tonight, remember the quiet message in those black stones. What is buried is never truly gone. Energy transforms, history returns, and choices echo forward, just like ancient sunlight. You are made of the same atoms that once swayed in those fern-filled forests. You are part of Earth's long remembering, and within you, too, is a choice: to burn too brightly or to warm gently. So breathe softly. Let the forest in your soul rest. The earth is whispering, and it remembers everything, especially you. The sleeping veins, Permian metal, and the heart of mountains. Beneath the surface of the earth, deep below the forests that once breathed and the rivers that once ran, there are veins, not of blood, but of metal. They shimmer quietly in the dark, silver streaks of copper, quiet pools of zinc, hidden seams of iron that once mingled with heat and pressure. Beneath the crust of Permian earth, once upon a time, while early reptiles wandered above and seed ferns danced in dry winds, something stirred deep below. Volcanoes whispered to the mantle, oceans retreated and returned, and the land cracked and folded like a sleeping giant's skin. And as the crust changed shape, mineral-rich water flowed through the cracks. Heat, pressure, and chemistry began their slow, sacred work, precipitating metals from fluid, layering atoms into or forming veins that would wait in stillness for hundreds of millions of years. These were Earth's quiet gifts, treasures born not of greed, but of patience. Iron that would one day build cities, copper that would carry human voices through wires, zinc that would protect, conduct, balance. They slept through extinction and renewal, undisturbed beneath deserts and folded mountain belts. And then came us, with hands that once shaped stone tools. We learned to read Earth's bones. We dug deep, followed the metal's whisper, and brought these ancient elements into the daylight once more. From the belly of the Permian, we pulled the scaffolding for our modern world. We built bridges, railways, radios, but often we forgot to say thank you. We forgot that the earth had given us more than materials. She had shared her history, her secrets, her silent endurance. Dear dreamer, as you lie still now, know that under your feet are the remnants of fire and stone, folded through time like a lullaby carved into mountains. Every device you touch, every building that surrounds you, holds atoms that were born in Permian shadows. And you are not separate from these stories. You carry them. You are them. So sleep now with that knowledge close to your chest. Let it comfort you, like the embrace of stone. Even when the world feels fractured, remember, what lies deepest is often the strongest. And just like the earth, your core is made of quiet strength. Earth and humanity, a bond forged in deep time. Take a deep breath, and now another. Every inhale you draw is filtered through the gifts of ancient worlds. Every step you take is anchored in a foundation older than memory. When you sip water, walk on pavement, flick on a light, you're touching echoes of the Permian. Because the earth remembers what it made, and it made everything we use. That coal which warmed your ancestors' hearths, it was once a fern. That iron within your city's bridges, your bicycle, perhaps even the blood in your veins, forged in Earth's fire long before your name existed. That copper in your phone, it once lay still in a silent mountain, formed while early reptiles blinked under strange sunrises. And now all of it is part of your life. But Earth didn't give these gifts with expectation. It offered them slowly, without voice, waiting for us to find them, to learn, to reflect. The question now is not what we've taken, but what we give back. Can we honor these deep-time gifts, not just through use, but through care? Can we mine with gentleness, innovate with humility, restore what we disturb? Dear soul, lying here beneath the sky of your thoughts, know that you are not small. You are part of a story that spans billions of years. Not just a user of the earth, but an inheritor, a dream keeper of deep memory. The rocks beneath you are not mute. They carry ancient wisdom, etched not in letters but in pressure. in silence, in slow change. When life feels uncertain, remember, the earth has endured more. She has weathered fire and ice, extinction and renewal, and from it all she blossomed again. So too can you. Let this thought be your lullaby. You belong to this earth, to its past, and to its future. The minerals beneath your feet do not just support your weight, they support your story. Sleep softly now, knowing that even the deepest things can rise again, and that you, like the earth, carry within you the quiet power to begin anew. 2. Environmental lessons from the Permian period. When the earth ran a fever, the lesson of sudden change. Once upon a time, in an age long before cities rose or clocks ticked, the earth grew hot, not the gentle warmth of springtime sun, but a searing, aching heat, the kind that dries rivers, wilts forests, and stills the breath of life. It was the end of the Permian, and something was wrong. From deep within the belly of the earth, 1,000 volcanoes stirred in unison, awakening in a thunderous chorus from the Siberian traps. They spilled lava not for days or weeks, but for hundreds of thousands of years. With every eruption, the sky grew thicker. Carbon dioxide rose like an invisible blanket, wrapping the world in too much warmth. Oceans grew sour, air thinned, rain turned to ash, and life, delicate, brave life, began to vanish. Over 90% of all marine species were lost. Forests withered into memory. Even in the highlands, even in the shadows, many could not survive the fever that burned across Earth's skin. And yet, dear listener, Earth did not die. She stumbled, yes, she gasped, but in time she healed. And so this becomes the whisper for us, a bedtime reminder not of fear, but of wisdom. When the balance of things is broken, when we warm too fast or take too much, life begins to fade, but it doesn't have to. We, the dreamers of today, can remember what the Permian taught: to walk gently, to listen when the skies grow strange, to cool the fever before it spreads. So as you drift into sleep, imagine your breath as part of this great balancing act. You are not apart from Earth. You are her child, with the power to change her future. And that, dear one, is a beautiful power to hold. The wounds of life when biodiversity collapsed. In the quiet corners of deep time, life once flourished like a song, sung in the chorus of trilobites, in the flutter of ancient dragonflies, in the soft tread of early reptiles across sunlit ferns. But then came silence. As Earth grew fevered, the orchestra fell still. One by one, voices vanished, corals crumbled, forests turned ghostly and pale, and creatures who had ruled for eons faded into shadow. It was not just one group, not just one forest, but nearly all. Entire lineages, both known and unknown, disappeared into the hush of extinction, like stars blinking out from a night sky. And yet, even in the great loss, a lesson lingered. Life is beautiful because it is fragile. Every leaf, every scale, every breath you take today is part of a line that somehow survived. So if you've ever felt broken or quieted by grief, remember this: the earth too has known great sorrow, and still she breathes. Let this bring you peace tonight. Let it be a lullaby whispered not just in science, but in soul. We are lucky to still be here, and because we are here, we can be gentle, we can protect, we can choose not to repeat the silence. The slow bloom, rebuilding biodiversity one breath at a time. Seedling. After the storm, after the fever, the world was quiet, but not empty. In hidden valleys and shaded lakes, small survivors clung to life, seeds buried deep, amphibians tucked beneath wet stones, reptiles huddled in the dark. And slowly, life returned. It didn't roar back. It whispered. New species began to appear, tentative and strange. A few ferns, a curious fish, a lizard with lungs adapted to thinner air. They weren't the same as before. They were something new, shaped by challenge, resilient because they had no other choice. Isn't that, in a way, what healing looks like for us, too? Not in loud declarations, but in soft determination. In the way you wake up again after a hard day. In the way your heart still finds room to hope. Earth didn't rush. She rebuilt herself with patience. And you, dear dreamer, you are allowed to be slow too. Rest tonight knowing this. The story of life did not end in the Permian. It grew stronger, wiser, and more wondrous, just like you can. The vanishing threads, when the web of life unravels. Every creature is a thread, every plant, a knot in the vast and sacred web. And in the Permian, many of those threads unraveled at once. When one species disappeared, others followed. Not because they were weak, but because everything is connected. The predators lost their prey. The trees lost their seed spreaders. The oceans lost their filters. This is how ecosystems collapse. Not in chaos, but in the quiet loss of link after link. And so tonight, as you curl beneath your own roof, think of the links in your life, the people who hold you up, the memories that keep you strong, the planet that cradles your existence. To protect one piece is to protect the whole. And in remembering the webs that failed, we can better guard the ones that still remain. Because you are not alone. You never were. Now let us plunge deeper into the Earth's fairy tale, as wounds heal and stones begin to speak. In the final part of this chapter, two sacred things will guide us: understanding and hope. Now let us continue together. Gently, whispers from stone when geology speaks. Beneath our feet lie libraries older than dreams, layers of stone, pressed through time, each stratum a sentence, each fossil a whisper. In the rocks of the Permian, the story is written, a world that thrived, that struggled, that nearly fell silent. There are ash beds from the great volcanic fires, carbon-rich seams from once lush forests, and ripple marks where ancient rivers once sang. But you must listen gently. Geology doesn't shout. It hums, like a lullaby for those willing to hear. Through these rocks, we learn not just dates and names, but emotion, rhythm, pain, and resilience. We see how the land changed, how deserts swallowed valleys, how oceans retreated, how mountains were born from quiet trembling. And in those patterns, we begin to understand our own place. Because the earth is not just something we live on, but something we live with. She keeps her memories in stone, not to warn us, but to remind us, you are part of something ancient, something sacred. Tonight, as you rest your head, imagine those layers below you, softly holding your story too. A new love for the earth, applying the lessons. In the hush after catastrophe, the earth offered us something precious, a second chance. The Permian extinction, vast and sorrowful, could have been the end, but it wasn't. Instead, it became the beginning of something wiser, an invitation to evolve, not just in body but in care. And now, millions of years later, we are the ones holding the torch. We have science to guide us, but we also have story, memory, heart. We know that when balance is broken, life pays a price. We know that the smallest creature matters. We know that healing is slow, and that rushing only deepens the wound. So what do? We walk gently. We build with love. We teach the next generation not just the names of species, but the meaning of belonging. You, dear one, you matter in this story. The earth doesn't need you to be perfect. She only asks you to be kind, to yourself, to others, to the wild, beating heart of this living planet. Let that be your lullaby tonight. Not fear, but fierce, quiet hope. Now let us gently enter the final chapter of Part 6, where fossil memories live not only in the ground, but also in the heart of culture. We are coming to the end of the Permian, but in truth, nothing is ever truly over, as long as it lives on in story, in art, and in human memory. When stone becomes story, the cultural echoes of the Permian. Close your eyes, dear listener, not just to sleep, but to drift. Drift back not 250 million years, but just far enough to feel the heartbeat of a world long gone. The Permian, still alive in the soft glow of art, in the hush of storytelling, and in the timeless dreams of humankind. Even after the rocks cooled and the forests withered, the memory of Permian never truly disappeared. It found its way into our paintings, our films, our books, our minds. Painted time, the Permian in artistic memory. Artists, like ancient alchemists, have long captured the unseeable, and the Permian, with its strange creatures and harsh beauty, has become one of their favorite spells. In vivid illustrations, Dimetrodon stands beneath an amber sun. In oil paintings, the deserts of Pangaea stretch endlessly, haunted by wind and memory. And in minimalist ink drawings, the curves of a gorgonopsid skull become symbols of power and transience. Through these forms, the Permian is no longer prehistoric. It is present, alive in feeling, in color, in breath. Art lets us not just understand the Permian, it lets us feel it. And maybe, just maybe, it lets us forgive ourselves a little for forgetting how precious and precarious life can be. Stories on the screen when Permian walks again. From the silver screen to digital documentaries, the Permian has stepped out of the shadows of time. In series like Walking with Monsters or Prehistoric Planet, animators breathe motion into bones, and music stirs emotion into extinction. Have you ever seen a creature with a sail on its back, or eyes like black stars, move across your TV screen? That's the Permian, reimagined, not just for spectacle, but for remembrance. Filmmakers don't just bring the past to life, they invite you in, and with every frame they ask, what if this world wasn't so different from ours? What if our world too could teeter? What if wonder was the cure? Inspire to remember the Permian in education and wonder. In classrooms, the Permian doesn't roar. It whispers. It whispers lessons about resilience, cycles, and choices. It shows students that ecosystems are delicate webs, and that even the mightiest species can fall, not from weakness, but from imbalance. Science books paint timelines, teachers tell stories, and students build model ecosystems, imagining how plants and reptiles coexisted. And beneath it all is a gentle message. You are connected to this. You carry this history in your cells, your lungs, your breath. The Permian becomes more than a date in a textbook. It becomes a mirror. What kind of world will we leave behind? From memory to meaning, cultural connection to Earth's past. Beyond art and schools and documentaries, there's a quiet revolution happening. The Permian is becoming a symbol of Earth consciousness. Writers, poets, and musicians are finding meaning in the Permian extinction, not just as tragedy but as metaphor for burnout, for global crisis, for healing. You see, even the worst extinction wasn't the end. It was a pause, a deep breath, a reshaping. That speaks to us now, doesn't it? In a world rushing to grow, consume, conquer, the Permian reminds us to slow down, to listen, to let things regrow in their own time. Some spiritual movements even meditate on deep time, using the extinction events of the past to reflect on impermanence and renewal. And in doing so, we realize the Earth isn't just our home, she's our teacher. So now, as your eyes grow heavy, know this: the Permian lives not only in fossils, but in feelings, not only in textbooks, but in you. And maybe tonight, as you sleep, your dreams will drift through ancient deserts, past red sand and giant lizards, into a world that once was and always is, because the past never truly leaves us. It just waits to be remembered. Sweet dreams, dear one. Whispering reflections. The long walk through Permian winds. Come close, dear dreamer. Let's take a final breath beneath the ancient skies of Permian. The winds have carried us far, across dry riverbeds, through forests of needles and dust, past the shimmering shimmer of lizard skin and sunlight. This was a time of change, a time when the earth, tired of its swampy song, rewrote its rhythm into something starker, tougher, and yet strangely beautiful. You've walked through that melody with us. The long, slow unfolding of a world shedding its softness and learning to survive under new suns. Do you remember the first reptiles? Those tiny wanderers with dry, scaled skin and daring hearts? They carried something revolutionary within. An amniotic egg, wrapped in protective layers like lullabies folded in parchment. No longer were they bound to water's edge. With their eggs safe from drying winds, they could explore inland. Bold and unafraid, this little miracle, so quiet, so humble, changed the rules of life forever. Because of it, the children of the earth began to crawl deeper into deserts, climb higher over rocks, and thrive far from the safety of streams. Life had invented independence, and with independence came transformation. Some grew bulky, herbivorous bodies, shaped like armored tanks of the forest. They grazed upon tough Permian ferns and desert brush. Others honed sharp teeth and patient eyes, perfect for the chase. Reptiles of every kind. Pelycosaurs with great sails along their backs, thick-skulled herbivores, and lithe predators danced through the ecosystems like characters in an epic, slowly being written in bone. Above them, the climate was changing. The lush wetlands of the Carboniferous had withered. In their place, broad stretches of dryland stretched endlessly, stitched together by the roots of drought-resistant flora. The earth was rearranging her gardens, and life, as it always does, listened and adapted. Even the sky seemed different in those days, harsher light, longer shadows. And yet, in this new world, creatures found rhythm again. They built new communities, complex and strange. Food webs evolved. Roles shifted. Life filled every empty corner, like wind finding cracks in stone. And what do we, modern wanderers, learn from this? That when the world changes, we can too. That softness is not weakness, but a way to hold steady even in dry winds. That even in the face of isolation, innovation blooms. And that within us, just like in those ancient eggs, is the power to hold space for life, even in a changing world. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture a lone reptile under a copper sunset, her eggs buried gently in warm sand. Around her, the desert hums. Above, strange constellations glimmer. She is not afraid. She trusts the earth. She trusts time. And she trusts the future, though she does not know it. For her children will one day become the ancestors of all reptiles, of dinosaurs, of birds, and even of us. From the ashes of the Carboniferous, the Permian sang a new song, not softer, but wiser. Taught life how to be resilient. It reminded nature that to survive is not merely to exist, but to evolve with courage. And so, we reach the end of this chapter, but not the end of the story. In the next breath, we will step into a darker tale, one of fire, silence, and loss. The great extinction awaits. But do not worry. Even in endings, there are beginnings hiding. Rest here for just a moment longer. You've walked far, seen much, and grown in understanding. Let the dust settle in your thoughts. Let the wind brush through memory. Let your breath soften with the rhythm of an ancient world. And when you're ready, we'll continue. The silent cradle of extinction. The winds begin to hush now. Even the desert seems to hold its breath. Something has shifted in the rhythm of time. The Permian, once so full of life, armored reptiles, towering flora, predatory prowlers, begins to tremble beneath forces it cannot escape. Beneath the earth's crust, ancient anger stirs. From deep within the mantle, the Siberian traps awaken. Have you ever heard the earth weep? Not with tears, but with fire. For thousands upon thousands of years, volcanic fury pours into the sky. Rivers of magma, clouds of soot and ash, billowing plumes of carbon and sulfur that stretch like scars across the heavens. The atmosphere, once a home for breath, becomes something else. A cauldron of choking gases, a mirror that traps sunlight, a veil that steals the stars. The climate spirals. Oceans grow acidic. Oxygen grows thin. Forests blacken. Rivers warm. The balance, delicate and hard-earned, collapses. And quietly, like a song fading at dusk, life begins to vanish. More than 90% of all marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrates disappear. Whole lineages wink out, not in a single heartbeat, but in a long sigh of extinction stretched over generations. What caused this? Not one thing, but many, woven together like the strands of a heavy dream. The Siberian volcanism that spewed greenhouse gases into the sky. The rapid warming that boiled seas and stifled breath. The oxygen starvation in oceans, where fish once danced and corals bloomed. The methane releases from melting seabeds, accelerating chaos. It was as if Earth herself was sick, feverish, breathless, shivering. But dear listener, in this darkness, don't be afraid, because even in endings, there is truth to hold. The Permian extinction teaches us something soft and strong, that nothing in nature is forever, not even stability, that sometimes change comes in waves we cannot see coming, and when it does, we mourn, we adapt, and slowly we begin again. You see, life didn't vanish entirely. Some species, quiet survivors, found ways to endure. Burrowers who hid beneath the soil. Seed bearers whose shells protected the next generation. Tiny fish who found refuge in deeper, cooler waters. These small acts of persistence became the seeds of future empires. And isn't that comforting? That even when the world breaks, it does not break everything. That in your own life, when catastrophe strikes, when the fire comes and the air feels thin and everything familiar seems to vanish, there is still a part of you that knows how to go underground, how to hold on, how to become the quiet ancestor of something better. So let this tale soothe you like the hush that follows a storm. Let the losses be honored, but not feared. Let the silence remind you, even after the world ends, something waits to begin again. And when you're ready, we'll step forward into the afterlight, into the slow, patient rebirth that followed. Because this story is not over. In the dust of the Permian, new footsteps will one day echo out of the ashes into the light of Triassic. In the soft, dim light that follows the storm, something stirs. The earth, though weary, begins to breathe again. Her skies, once choked with smoke, start to clear. Her oceans, once suffocated and still, begin to ripple with cautious motion. And in the quiet soil, in the forgotten cracks of stone, life whispers once more. What remains after a world ends? Not just silence, but the possibility of becoming. Out of the ashes of Permian, new forms begin to rise. Tiny, resilient creatures, ancestors of what will become mammals, dinosaurs, and birds, take their first trembling steps into a changed world. The survivors of the great dying are few, but they carry within them the seeds of all that will come. And so begins the Triassic, the next act in Earth's long, unfolding lullaby. A time of experimentation, a time when the Earth, like a tired artist, begins to sketch again, drawing new body shapes, testing new behaviors, composing new food webs in the silence left behind. The first true dinosaurs appear, not as giants, but as nimble travelers, lean and curious. They do not yet roar, they wait, for the world is still healing, and they are patient. As you rest now, know this, you are part of that legacy. You are made of survival, of stories written in dust and flame, of genes carried through fire and ice. You are the dream of those creatures who curled into burrows while the sky rained ash. You are the hope of those who adapted, who waited, who tried again. So if your world ever feels like it's ending, remember the Permian. Remember the silence, and how from it new songs began. Let the lessons of this chapter warm your heart as you sleep. That even great endings are just preludes. That fragility and strength are not opposites, but partners. And that healing is not forgetting, but growing through the cracks. Tonight, the earth turns softly beneath your dreams. The stars look down, unchanged since reptiles first opened their eyes. And sleepy history gently folds the ancient map of Permian away, placing it next to all the other epochs, kept safe for another night. So rest now under a blanket older than time. Let the winds of extinction and rebirth lull you. Let the ancestors of dinosaurs keep watch beside your dreams. Tomorrow we begin again, in a world slowly filling with strange, upright creatures, with forests of conifers, with creatures who will one day rule the land. But tonight you sleep, knowing you've witnessed a turning of ages. From the first lizards to the last embers of fire, from the pulse of evolution to the peace of stillness. Good night, dear listener. Sleep gently with the earth beneath you and the stars above. Good night from the Permian, a sleepy farewell from Earth's ancient heart. And now, dear listener, let your shoulders soften, let your breath settle, like dust falling gently over a forgotten plain. You've journeyed far tonight, across a world long vanished, through deserts of flame and forests of stone, through the rise of mighty reptiles and the silence of great extinction. You've listened to the Earth's deep sighs, and still you're here. So rest now. You've earned it. Close your eyes. Let your jaw unclench, your hands grow quiet. Let the muscles around your heart feel safe enough to soften. No effort now, just being. Imagine that you're lying beneath an ancient sky. Not today's sky, but one painted in warmer hues, where twin moons hang low and the constellations sing songs from before names were invented. Above you, faint stardust shimmers. Below you, the earth still pulses with memories. This is your bed tonight, a world cradled in time. The Permian has whispered its secrets to you. Some bright, some tragic, but all true. It told you of great creatures that once roamed dry riverbeds and shadowed cliffs. It told you of fire and breathlessness, of endings that left the world hushed. And it told you of resilience, of small lives that clung on, quietly, stubbornly, lovingly. And now, as we close this chapter, I want you to remember this. You too carry that same resilience. The strength to continue even when the warmth is gone. The softness to mourn without turning bitter. The bravery to believe that after endings come new beginnings. Let that be your comfort tonight. If your day was heavy, let it go. If the world outside feels like too much, if no one quite understands, if you're tired of pretending you're okay, then just know you are understood here. Right now, you are seen and deeply, gently held. In this moment, there is no pressure to perform, no burden to carry. You are not broken. You are simply between stories like Earth was once between Permian and Triassic. There is beauty in that pause. So as the echoes of ancient life fade into quiet, let the rhythm of your breath align with the rhythm of the Earth's healing. Feel the soft weight of time wrap around you like a blanket spun from starlight and sand. Feel how small you are and how infinite. You are safe now. You are whole even in your unraveling. You are loved even in your silence. Sleepy history will keep watch over your dreams, tracing lullabies from the fossils of forgotten creatures, lighting gentle fires beside your sleeping thoughts, and whispering bedtime stories carried by winds older than memory. And when you dream tonight, perhaps you'll walk through Permian forests, hand in hand with a reptile ancestor, or swimming through a shallow sea with fish that glow like lanterns. Or perhaps you'll simply float, soft, weightless, carried by time. Let yourself drift. Let the earth hum you to sleep. Let the stillness embrace you like the arms of a world that remembers. Whatever comes, may it bring rest. May it bring peace. May it bring you back to yourself. So sleep well, dear friend, with the earth beneath you and the stars above. You are part of this story always, and tomorrow we begin again with a world reborn. Good night from the Permian. With warmth, with wonder, sleepy history.